आपको आवाज आ रही है? ना तो हो गया वो मैडम है ना। नहीं मैम दोबारा आप बोलिए।
Hello, participants who join online. Am I audible?
Yes,
Anyone
ma'am.
can answer?
Yes, ma'am.
you are audible.
You can audible. You are audible. Dr. Shruti, can you stop sharing your screen? You are to present right now because I can just see your screen on my desktop.
No, ma'am. I'm sorry if it is there. I will check it out.
Yeah, because you've shared your screen. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
वो आवाज सही नहीं आ रही मैम उनकी आवाज सही नहीं आ रही।
Dr. Hema, your voice is not very clear.
Am I audible right now, ma'am?
You are. Now you are.
Okay.
Can we have an audio check for all the others who are going to speak? I think speaking, you have a paper. Dr. Vicky Mathur. Dr. Shruti Kannan. Is there only one online paper?
Ma'am, Maya is also online.
So just as audio, those who are presenting online, please say a few words so that we can do audio check one by one. So maybe Ruchika.
Yeah, ma'am. Good morning to you.
Yeah, no
And
problem.
yeah, ma'am, I'm presenting online only because I'm off to station.
Dr. Seema is audible. Who else? Dr. Smriti, are you presenting online?
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Smriti Mathur,
Yes, ma'am.
are you presenting online?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so please say a few words so as to check your audio. Can you say a few words?
Yes, ma'am.
And so that we can check your audio. And your camera is on your head rather than on your face. Please either take the camera down or whatever. You can raise the device that you showed on. If it's a phone, you can raise it.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Myself, and I will also present online, ma'am.
Okay. We have to get little louder. थोड़ी सी आवाज आपकी कम आ रही है तो जब आप प्रेजेंट करें तो थोड़ा सा ना डिवाइस का वॉल्यूम बढ़ाना
मैम आप ठीक है?
मैम है ना ये शेयर नहीं कर पा रही पीपीटी कौन है मैम ये है ना डॉक्टर श्रुति माथुर ये पीपीटी शेयर ये इन्होंने क्या करा एंटायर स्क्रीन पूरा कर दिया इन्होंने
Dr. Srini, in case you don't know how to share the screen, you can mail your PPT to us and we will share it for you. From here. अभी आपने पूरी स्क्रीन शेयर करके अभी उसको बंद करिए.
Okay, ma'am.
Stop नहीं उसमें ग्रुप में जाइए stop share. Stop share. Exit तो ठीक है नहीं. Stop share. So PPT
Ma'am, it's okay.
आपका अभी भी ना ये कॉल आ रहा है यहाँ से भी आप लॉगिन कर रहे हैं एक बार वो वीडियो बंद करो
नहीं वो तो क्या है जो बोलता है ना वो आ जाता है इसको
स्पीकर पिन हो जाते हैं
हाँ वो तो हो जाते हैं
फिर वो करते हैं ना जैसे कल प्लेनरी जब होगा ना वो तो 4 स्पीकर थे ना उनको एक साथ पिन कर देना
इसमें कौन कौन से स्पीकर है मैम देखो
अभी तो देखो हेमा का नोट रहा है
हेमा
अभी तो ठीक है ऑटोमेटिकली होगा
ऑटोमेटिक
प्लेनरी
we have our guest with us and we will begin 5-7 minutes from now 5 minutes it's 10:26 and we will the time 10:30 we will just begin on time just wait for a few more minutes
Am I audible?
हाँ बोलिए सर, अब बोलिए.
Hello, am I audible to all the online participants? If anybody could.
Yes, yes, you are audible.
Okay, thank you. Can I kindly have the confirmation from all the online participants who would be presenting their papers? Can I kindly have the do we have Dr. Uday Kosavar with us? Dr. Uday Kosavar.
Dr. Monica, are you there? Dr. Monica?
Hello.
Hello.
Do we have Dr. Hema Gambhotra?
Yeah, I'm there. I'm there.
Dr. Rajshri Matpal. Dr. Rajshri Matpal.
So Dr. Sonika is there.
Anju Chaudhary. Dr. Ruchika Sharma.
Yes, sir.
So Dr. Sonika is there. Am I audible?
या ये क्या मालूम से जाना यार, मैं उठ के कहाँ जाए हम.
Dr. Sunita Manda. Dr. V.P. Raj.
Yes, sir, I'm present here.
Sorry.
Sir, Ma'am Shruti Tandon is
I'm
also
present, sir,
present.
online. I'm present there, Dr. Riti Raj.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Dr. Mahendra Thori. Do we have Dr. Mahendra Thori? T.P. Parekh. T.P. Parekh, sir.
Yes, sir.
Vedant Swami. Anuradha Sharma.
Sir, Shruti Tandon also.
Okay. And Pratibha Sharma. Pratibha Sharma is there. There are 4 who came.
Sir, Shruti Tandon also.
Fortunate. Thank you. Do we have Dendu Singh? Dendu Singh? Khushbu Das? Khushbu Das?
Yes, sir, I'm present.
Okay. Hanam Singh? Mr. Hanam Singh?
Yes, sir. Present, sir.
Okay. And last one, Sweetie Mathurji.
Yes, sir.
Sweetie Mathurji?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Dendu, are you there? Denu Singh ji. Very good morning to one and all present here. I am Manish Yadav, Assistant Professor, Department of Sociology. Being privileged to welcome you all on behalf of the department on the second day of the National Conference on Sustainable Development and Quality of Life, Prerequisites in Post-Pandemic Society. We shall be beginning now with our co-technical session. Today, we are very fortunate to have with us Professor Jagdish Yadav sir, who is Dean School of Social Sciences, Central University of Rajasthan. Sir will be sharing the session. Professor Jagdish Yadav is in social work, teaching since March 2000, and having a unique combination of teaching, research, creating, writing, and administration. He is passionate for teaching and known for his innovative and unique experiments in social work education. He is at Central University of Rajasthan since August 2013. Prior to this engagement, he taught in North Maharashtra University, Jalgaon, CSRD, ISW, Ahmednagar, Maharashtra, Bharati Vidyapeeth, New University, Pune, and Walchand College, Surat. Sir is also member of Executive Council and Academic Council at the Central University of Rajasthan, and as a member Board of Studies, Mizoram University, Marshall Pradesh University, Shimla, HT, Assam University, Silchar, BPM, D. Sonipat, Haryana. Natural Resource Management, WASH, Social Advocacy, Community Organization, and Development Practices. Higher education are the areas of his academic interest, where he published 10 books and more than 15 articles. Perspectives in governance of higher education, quality concern in higher education. Both of these books were released in All India Vice Chancellor's Conference 2010, which acknowledges the nationwide appreciation. Sir is also Chief Editor of the Indian Journal of Sustainable Development, a total board member of the South Asian Journal of Participatory Development, and Associate Editor for Indian Journal of Democratic Governance. He has also, in recognition of the exceptional performance of work with District Collector Ajmer in implementing Swachh Bharat Abhiyan by converting Murgi village into open defecation free with solid and liquid waste management facility and Unnat Bharat Abhiyan on 18 September 2017 at the hands of the Honorable Minister of Human Resource Development Secretary, Higher Education and Charity, Chairperson UGC and Chairperson EICT. Sir has also been organizing secretary for the national conferences. So we are very fortunate to have you with us today, sir, and welcome you. And may I request Professor Rashmi Jaina, Head Department of Sociology, to kindly present a sapling as a now. Today, we also have with us Professor Deepa Mathur. She is retired Professor, Department of Sociology, University of Rajasthan, Jaipur, as co-chair for today's session. I feel privileged to welcome her not only because she has been long associated with the department, but also because she happens to be my research supervisor. Professor Mathur has held various important positions in the university during her tenure. She has been organizing secretary of various national conferences, coordinator and convener of various committees. Ma'am is also life member of Indian Sociological Society, International Sociological Society, and Rajasthan Sociological Society. Ma'am also has to her credit several paper presentations internationally, and her papers have been published in journals of repute. Women in Family and Work and Women in Transition in South Asia are the two seminal books published in the repute publication. So, thank you, ma'am, for sparing your valuable time and welcome you. May I kindly request Rashmi Jain, ma'am, Aditi, ma'am, please kindly present the sapling to ma'am. Thank you. So, now without further ado, I hand over the mic to the chair for the proceedings. Over to you, sir.
Very good morning. Good morning, people who are listening to us online and those who are listening here. To begin with, today the Rajasthan Summer is all people, and since our conference action has sustained towards making Rajasthan and subsequent Rajasthan and fast forward very quality. From this kind of communication, the area of environment, smart officer of regulatory around. And he has done very visual job. He appointed another research officer to monitor the timeline. There are well paper presenter in an online form virtually, and two people are exploring that hesitant. Because he now have find out just to monitor the time and he find permission. But since we are opening the day and this is going to be the second day of the conference, I just learn or I will find my best to put it in the perspective. As our conference title of this team around probably the last year of the corona has got numbers of the lesson and those lesson that there can be business in a lot of design. And today I will talk about that how our technology has brought us together. That certain people are listening us or they are going to present their paper from a different part of our country or different part of the Rajasthan. But
इस पे अपने Zoom पे ना हाँ तो मुझे दो मैं
have got together because of the power of the technology. This technology was always there, but it is a result of the people that how we are using technology. And we have seen numbers of the cases. And let us in the context of the data, let us take example. Okay, that we all diagnosis technology or basically made for taking the women's health, but how we have used the technology for increasing the numbers of the business of our country, and we have seen that how the gender imbalance has affected the whole society. So technology is always the blessing for the human mankind, but it is the wisdom or it is the social science, power of the social sciences, that how we are complementing the science with the technology. Unfortunately, so being a person from the social sciences and particularly from the social work, which we do believe that we are the practice-based professionals, I firmly believe that entire social sciences, they are in identity crisis, subject to they are not going to do this ability or their time in this context. But see, I am very optimistic. I always believe that the young people, they are not just the president of the country, but they are going to serve the country by making the society highly sustainable. So, people those who are granted today's conference with a lot of academic work, with a lot of preparation, with certain things in their mind, I welcome them all. And to begin with our today's session, I am going to invite the person first who are physically here because they are the best people to set the context. But as this is the quarter 11, and we have been instructed by the organizer that we need to stop by 12 o'clock. So we are hardly having 5 minutes. So we are going to play the very judicious role. Unfortunately, we are having only 4.5 minutes for the presenter. If each person uses very judiciously his or her 5 minutes, then we can make a certain impact of this conference. So what we can do after 5 minutes, either I am going to stand, and if I am going to stand, you are going to speak. This is the simple formula that we can follow because we don't have a reason here. Okay, so the simple sign is that okay, either Harish, okay, he will on, but if we don't listen his signal, then we, As a chair, we are going to stand till you go to sleep. But that can happen in physical mode. So what will happen to people who are presenting online? So simple formula in their case can be followed. Okay. Till 4.5 minutes, their mic will be put on mode. But if they are not active or they are not going to confine themselves to 5 minutes, then I will request the operator, okay, to shut down their mic or to put them, mute mode. So that is the signal for it. So the people, those who are presenting like Sunita ji and Prema ji, I do hope that I am audible. And these are very simple instructions to make this session more live and more enjoyable. So you just have 5 minutes to present for all of you. And now by soliciting the permission from the co-chair and the seminar organizer and the head of the department, I am now inviting Vedanta Swami. Vedanta Swami, you just have 5. I call it 9. Please. Ladies and gentlemen, please be attentive and to encourage him, put your hands together. Encourage him, give me hands.
Let's thank you so much. That is chair, portion of the technical session and of the session coordinator. I extend my gratitude for this to be included such an education experience. As Professor Yadav said, I have 5 minutes, so I will be very brief with it. My title of paper is Impact of COVID-19 and on distribution of vaccines. This paper has made conscious attempts to underline the impact COVID had and continue to have on distribution of vaccines. To put things into perspective, in the paper I have gone into the history of the evolution of this pandemic. But exactly 2 years ago, 30th March 2020, in India, we only had 250 cases and 32 deaths. But when we look back now, at this time, I think March 2022, we have more than 450 crore cases and 4.3 lakh people have died due to this pandemic, and millions are still facing the after effects of this infection. This unprecedented speed of infection was actually unprecedented. This pandemic has had a profound impact on the world in 22 countries, where we can say this pandemic as one of the greatest human tragedies. Humankind has suffered from numerous occasions, from wars, genocides, from oppressions, famines, and pandemics. But never in this kind of interconnected world where systems are so interconnected, then one subsystem has its spillover effects for other subsystems as well. Now, this pandemic also offers us an opportunity for a social experiment at international level. As this pandemic wasn't limited to survive or to avoid the infection, but it also meant different things for families. Some were subjected to direct loss of family members and some were still. There were also anxieties, constant threats for possible loss and multifaceted other problems of increased unemployment, financial vulnerability, and new modes of communication which made it difficult for everyone. Now, let me shift our attention to family as an institution so that we can understand how family as an institution functions in the society and then we can pose the impact the COVID had on the institution of family. In sociological perspective of today's family can be understood by 3 approaches, which is the conscious approach, first of all, then conflict and social interaction approach. In conscious approach, we see that
Can't hear.
many functions. In conflict, they agree that can perform certain functions, but it also proves violence, conflicts, and other social inequalities in society. And social interactionism gives us understanding that how and why families perform the way they do. Now, how COVID and families are interrelated is important. That first of all, we understand that how coronavirus and the measures which were adopted by us to contain the virus
impacted individuals' well-being, mental and physical health, and financial situations. Although these measures vary per reason, but the impact on family dynamics, relationship, and routines was found everywhere. Family is a very important social institution for development of children, adolescents, especially during the times of troubles, as family relationships can offer comfort and support. Then the pandemic may disrupt the family system and ultimately affecting child development. This virus has been more affected to some particular groups like elderly, migrant workers, and those institutionalized people who have less financial resources are more at risk. Some underlying issues of income inequality, racism, ethnic differences, and racism have become more visible in this pandemic. Now I will during COVID-19 and the impact it has on children and elderly care. Families and children are supported by a special social ecological system that has been forced to adapt quickly to support families' needs, often with limited information or evaluations. Since schools and other childcare institutions were closed due to pandemic, concerns aren't limited to disruptions of typical classroom learning, but also for the loss of system-level safeguards such as nutrition programs, after-school care, health and counseling services, and general medications that seek to mitigate consequences of health and social inequalities among structurally vulnerable children and families. Even now, when schools and workplaces are starting to open, there are concerns of health risks of returning to populated spaces affecting families with low incomes, fewer resources, and with limited option for returning to work. This pandemic saw parents struggling with full-time supervision and childcare along with added pressure of financial insecurity and emotional stress. Families that have fewer financial and social resources, limited technological access, and grounded homes are experiencing increasing. Okay, so I will be very brief from now on. So, yeah, next. I think the impact of COVID-19 and the lockdown measures or the strict social distancing measures that were adopted by governments and other agencies. Especially we are talking about online education, but I think this is only the one facet of this pandemic, how children has been affected by other factors that there are also included, especially focus is limited to the parents, but we also need to understand that families exist in an ecosystem where we need to help the parents as well, because their life hasn't been easy throughout this pandemic. There has been financial vulnerabilities, income has been lost, they have been unemployed for a very long time. Now, elderly care in Indian society, elderly care is a family that's in which families, younger adults tend to take care of their aged parents. But this pandemic has made us realize that elderly are in far more need than just a physical connection or communication that we have with them at this point of time. Work-life balance is another facet that has been impacted by this pandemic. In 21st century, there has been social inequalities based on gender, with where paid work, household work, and paid tasks are more inclined towards duty over women in the family. But this pandemic has made occupations divided into two areas, essentials and non-essentials, where we find that women, as in particular, are overrepresented in certain professions such as healthcare, teachers, and other service-based industries where those services have been shut down. So there has been a triple burden on women. Essentially, they have to work out from home in very risky professional jobs, and then there is additional pressure which is put on by extra care tasks that has to be done at the home, taking children and elderlies, and then there has been another facet that more women has been unemployed due to COVID. Now, all these negative points also point out to a possible catalyst that in this pandemic, fathers have had more tasks concerning household and care tasks, which gives us that it might be a possible catalyst for renegotiating the gender dynamics in a family. Even for a temporary period, we have seen this, but I think in future the fathers and mothers can negotiate their tasks relating to households. I will conclude with several points that this pandemic, I would like to say that I'm very hopeful that it's the last pandemic that we see in the future as well, but we are far from it. So I hope that next time when such a pandemic or such an unprecedented event comes to our life, the only focus should not be on the medical or the spread of the infection, but it should be given an important emphasis that societal implications of such pandemics are very high. And we cannot live in a challenge that their families would be resilient, that there would be stability in the family, but as a basic unit, I don't think that there will be such stability in future as well. And this pandemic will provide us with plenty of information about other factors as well regarding how future pandemics and how not to avoid the societal implications of major and that preventing spread of the virus. I think, thank you. I hope, sir, I was in time.
Yeah, you have taken increases on very thank you. Thank you. And sorry to be clear with you. Next time, observing that people are writing, people are speaking, you are snapping their book, you are snapping the other book, if you are writing your assignment, definitely you can make faculty bring smile on their faces, but you need to submit just now. So please don't write your assignment, just anything. Okay, please be synchronized. Yeah, wonderful. So your excellent. So please be attentive, please be sensitive, and if it is the process. Welcome Professor Rajesh Gupta, he is your own faculty members. Welcome to the session, sir. Now we are having Hema Gupta from Jammu. I'm requesting you, ma'am, to please follow time. 3 minutes for your own presentation, 1.5 minutes for your own free remarks, and last 30 seconds, for the closing remarks. So only 5 minutes for you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. At the outset, let me thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity. A very good morning to Rashmi ma'am, Rajiv sir, and we have our roots connected with the Rajasthan. Our very dear student Amithi is a part of your faculty. Thank you so much. Today, I'm going to make a presentation on the topic Migration and Rehabilitation, a study of Kashmiri Pandits in Jammu. My paper is actually going to focus on the two important concepts, the re-ethnicization and de-ethnicization. That when a community migrates, whether it is the re-ethnicization process that takes place or is it the de-ethnicization process that takes place. In case of Kashmiri migrants, what had happened is that there was a sudden change in their socio-cultural setup. A sudden change had been brought up by a certain kind of a migration. And these days, again, people are again trying to revive their primordial identity, why their memories have again, they have again started to talk about the memories, the old memories, because we have in the limelight the Kashmir files. I'm not going to touch on the movie as of now, but I'm going to talk about this community, that how this community is talking in terms of revival of primordial identity. This is a part of my own PhD research work, which I completed in the year 2009. And this area is very close to my heart. And I'm very happy that now, earlier in the forms of books, writings, but now we have the visual media coming up where the things have been shown to the people. The whole point is when the community gets deterritorialized. I have basically picked up the concept by Professor T.K. Uman, where he argues that ethnicity is a construct which is contextual, situational, and in a continuous process of definition, formation, change, and redefinition. Hence, one sees that Kashmiri Pandit identity is also contextual. Before migration, the cultural identity in the form of Kashmiriya was, because less paucity of time, so I'll not go into the details of this Kashmiriyat identity, but before migration, it was the Kashmiriyat identity which was important for them. But after mass exodus, post-migration, now the identity from Kashmiriyat has shifted more into a kind of a religious identity, where being a Kashmiri Pandit, Kashmiri Muslim, and Kashmiri Sikh has become more important. Even when you go these days, when this whole movie, the talk about the Kashmir files have come up, there is again this notion of Kashmiriyat coming in. That is that Kashmiriyat is now more important, or is that religious identity of being a Kashmiri Pandit? Because after migration, one gets to see the polarized religious identity of being a Muslim or identity of being a Kashmiri Pandit. Now, in the paper, again, I have picked up three important assumptions. Because Pandits have been talking in terms of revival of their identity, and why a community always keeps on talking about the revival of the identity is because there is an effect because of migration on their entire socio-cultural and economic life. Because when a community migrates, it is not just the community loses the land, because we have been talking about the concept of sustainability. It is not only the sustainability, but now there is this concept of multiple sustainabilities, where this socio-economic and cultural life also becomes important. So for these Pandits, when they migrated, they lost their own cultural traditions. But one thing during the research, during the field work, which I found was very important, was that sustainability, because the community had to sustain. So it was only one variable through which till date this community is sustaining. If you see their marriage patterns, there is a lot of change. You see their food habits, there is a lot of change. You see their dress patterns, there is a lot of change. But one such variable through which they are still trying to retain their identity of being Pandit is the attribute of their language. They have tried to retain their language. The people, the family members communicate. They make it a point to communicate in their Kashmiri language. The children have been taught that Kashmiri language. Now, language also remains important if it has marketability. Pandits, when they migrated, I will specifically talk about the Jammu region, when they migrated to Jammu, the language had no market because they could not communicate in Kashmiri in the market itself. So it was only within the domestic domain, it was only within the family that they could try to retain their identity. So on the basis of this, I have tried to generate three important assumptions. One, changes take place in an evolutionary manner with incremental changes. So there are changes which take place maybe in an incremental manner. Changes also take place through diffusion process. Now, in an incremental level and diffusion process, this has not happened in case of Kashmiri Pandits. The third very important category is the changes that took place through forced migration, that is involuntary displacement, that has led to the drastic changes and posing a threat to their cultural identity of the migrated community, because it was in a drastic level. So in modernization also, there was an article written by Professor Gill in Sociological Bulletin, wherein she has very beautifully emerged the concept of that in a modern world, when people there is this concept of global world in a more modernized world. Global world means there is de-ethnicization, that identities tend to maybe not be that sharp and revive themselves, but they tend to be more kind of there is an assimilation process. But in case of Kashmiri Pandits, what we
Dr. Hema, will you please continue?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was, is that I'm over? I'll just wind up. Yeah. Now, what had happened is there is a strong re-ethnicization of identity. And this we have seen again in a more postmodern world where they were forced to migrate from their places. Now, when this question of rehabilitation is coming up, till now, they have been given a separate kind of a land, which is a Jakti place in Jammu, which is 8 to 10 kilometers away from the Jammu city towards the Negrota side. And they have been given these 2-room tenements. But still, till date, after coming of lot many generations, they are still trying to revive their identity, and they are still thinking of going back to Kashmir. And now the scenario which has come in front of the entire world in the form of a movie, where again their memories have been refreshed. Again, there are sharp, I would say as a researcher, sharp ethnic divides also, ethnic divides in the sense that once again, for them, being a Kashmiri Pandit has taken a primordial place. Thank you so much, sir. Very less time. I wanted to maybe make more interpretations of this study, but thank you so much.
Yeah. I could see that you are very ardent researcher, and Kashmir is a topic, which invite the attention of the filmmaker, novelists, I look forward to your paper that you are going to submit to the organizer.
Thank you.
Let us go to Dr. Shruti Tandon. Dr. Shruti Tandon, if you are there.
Dr. Sonika. Good morning, sir. Shruti Tandon this side. A very good morning to all of you, respected dais and dear presenters. It's really a matter of pleasure for all of us that we are listening great dignitaries in this national conference, and all the presenters also are giving vivid views on the different dimensions of society. My topic of presentation is sustainable tourism development. As we all know, that tourism has been an integral part of economy for an exchange earner, employment generation, tradition of culture of any nation is totally suitable here in tourism. If we talk particularly in Indian context, Atithi Devo Bhava is the central theme of Indian socio-cultural ethos. In addition to this, there has been remarkable increase few years back in tourist arrival in recent years in India due to the efforts made by the Indian government, including Incredible India campaign in overseas market. Tourism industry was third largest net foreign exchange earner after gems and jewelry and ready-made garment. It has emerged as an instrument of employment generation, poverty alleviation, and sustainable human resource development. One of the most important features of tourism industry in India was its contribution to national integration and for preservation of cultural, natural environment and enrichment of social and cultural lives of people. But as we all know at the same time that as a consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic, the globe as well as India is facing an unparalleled global health, social and cultural economic crisis. Travel and tourism are among the most affected industries with worldwide demand plummeting as a result of worldwide travel restriction, including the closure of several borders to control the infection. If we talk particularly about India, the closure of hotels, dharmshalas, resorts, etc., and airport and flights have been halted after the start and spread of the COVID-19 pandemic has already resulted in the projected revenue loss of 1.25 trillion rupees for the Indian tourism industry by 2020. A care rating agency research says that the amount corresponds to a 40% downfall in the total revenue over the fiscal year 2019. Transportation sector along with aviation industry, hospitality industry suffer a lot, resulting in the increase of environment and employment problem. Now the question is this, that how to develop tourism again in a sustainable way as a tool of sustainable development. Tourism should be embodied in the framework of sustainable development. The concept of sustainability has three interconnected aspects: environment, socio-cultural, and economic. Sustainability assumes its maximum value when every one of its features reaches its maximum efficiency, specifically when first the country is able to satisfy the human needs using natural resources in a stable and efficient way, ensuring a long-term growth. Second, the income generated by this growth are redistributed among future and present generation in an equitable way. And third, the resources should be regenerated without altering the natural environment. So the concept of sustainability should be applied to all fields of tourism. If we talk about the major constraints or the problems in the way of sustainable tourism in the present scenario, that underdeveloped infrastructure after pandemic is again an important reason to be raised. Quite often tourists are cheated also, and indecencies of robbery and eve-teasing are also a matter of concern. Lack of proper coordination within government officials between the government and non-government agencies working in this sector, and village tourism is required to take a central position for protecting people from cultural pollution. Therefore, there is an urgent need of ethics in tourism. Ethical tourism is in its best interest of the time is required. It offers tour operators a competitive advantage and safeguards the future of the tourism industry by ensuring the long-term sustainability of destination. In this manner, sustainable tourism should contain following components. After releasing of lockdown barrier, safety measures are being taken care for opening of the industry in a phased manner with standardized health and hygiene protocols. Information about the destination and travel expenses should be easily available, and at the same time, the tourists should be addressed.
Last 30 seconds.
Yes, sir. And the last, an effective and strong sustainable tourism strategy require proper information, education to make stakeholder aware about the problems of the industry. As the time is now totally changed in this post-pandemic era, we all require to work in an effective way again to make our country at the top of the tourism industry and work for the betterment of each and every citizen who visited our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being in time. I'm sorry to be cruel with you. Friends, we are clubbing the theme together. Like that, we had a representation from Kashmir and we follow the tourism. Now we are going to club the theme of the families. And from this theme, I'm now inviting Dr. Ruchika Sharma. Is online learning model for higher education. So I will invite her.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Dr. Ruchika Sharma.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, very good morning to all you and my mentors also. I'm presenting the paper is online learning a model for the higher education. We all know that the pandemic situation has changed the total scenario, and worldwide consciousness that presents the way of life style does not work. And there are many areas that need the revolutionary changes, and it becomes obvious. And one among is the educational sector in India or the worldwide. And we know that because of the emergencies and lockdowns and the preventive measures has taken and blended the life of the students, parents, and teachers. And to combat this inevitable crisis in the educational sector, I started conducting the online classes or the courses, and there's the need of the vast change. As we know that universities invested its better IT software, students learned to socialize online, and they conducted the online lectures so that the students cannot suffer. And even we are having the seminar and we are attending the seminar online method, which is also the part of this online education. And we know that I'm moving to the change, that we are adapting the change. As in the person, we know that the traditional lectures are replaced with the live lectures, assignments were submitted virtually, and the graduation moves online. And even we know that all the programs which are conducted, because the students and the faculties and the education system not suffer in this crisis situation of the pandemic. Many universities of the higher education has given an example of university that succeed in adapting quickly to this new style of learning. And even every colleges, all the higher institutions are the part of this. Along with that, we know that there's a change in the career fair also, and people are going for the online interviews and all, which is very fruitful for the coming generation, we can say that. And we know that the improvements in the IT software is also requirement, because the 2020 alone, there was a record-breaking investment in the education technology, we can say that. And this investment in the early stages of the pandemic mean there was a huge step forward to the way lectures were taught. But the traditional online pattern, teaching pattern is changed to the online patterns, and which are fruitful for the students, we can say that. Along with that, I would like to say that many universities are finally looking towards on-campus courses, online maybe used, and they're making their apps and all, so that the students cannot suffer, or the higher education should not suffer for that. And we are connecting with the people around the world, as well as we all are sitting in the seminar room. You are on the offline mode method, but we are over here to online method to presenting the papers. And from overall Rajasthan, overall India, the people are there. Somewhere we can say that it is connecting the people around the world. And many universities of India are focusing on developing a digital ecosystem, which will create a vibrant environment for the students to study and socialize themselves. Even many of the competitions are beyond organized on the online mode method. And it is necessary to say recent examples of online hosted by the universities on music rivers, we can say the World Water Days, online fitness coaching events, all systems are going on. And even we can say that the rise of the online courses, even the Kota IIT, Triple IIT, given the example example of the MOOC courses, the massive open courses for the students, and they are the self-paced e-courses which are open to everyone for free of charge. Often they are often offered by the prestigious institutions because to give the learners an opportunity to attend the additional courses of their choice, whatever they are, and the soft skills are also increasing here. And somewhere we can say that it is also available for the faculty members also. We are having we have been conducting the FDPs or orientation and refreshment programs for the faculties. That is also fruitful for the everyone, we can say that, which will play in the role important for the coming education system. And along with that, we can conducting the different workshop programs. And I can say that the hybrid learning, the future of the higher education is there, because we even the conference is also going on the hybrid system. That is very fruitful for every person. We can say that as a remote teaching has proven to be the success, it is up to the universities and the students to decide what the future of the higher education will look like. And that will be, according to me, that will be the very great future for us. And sir, I'm concluding, sir. Finally, I can say that the university has obtained the telepresence robots, and which will allow the students and faculty who are unable to reach to the campus, to the remotely areas, and we can, and whatever the future of the higher education hold, but the online learning has made a significant contribution to us, and it will be the model for us. Thank you very much, sir, for giving me the time.
Thank you very much. Do we have Dr. Kirti Parikh here, because she's also having the paper on Bharati? Okay, if she's not going to be there, then we need to shift now the working pattern. नई कार्य संस्कृति की ओर. Dr. Sunita Manda, 4 minutes time for you. 4 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much, sir, and organizing committee for giving this opportunity to share my views on the theme of work from home, नवीन कार्य संस्कृति की और मानवता. जैसा कि हम सब जानते हैं कि द्वितीय विश्व युद्ध के बाद जो कोविड-19 है, वो इतनी बड़ी और महत्वपूर्ण घटना है जिसने संपूर्ण मानवता को वैश्विक स्तर पर इतनी अधिक इंटेंसिटी और स्केल पर प्रभावित किया है कि कोविड महामारी को 21वीं सदी की पहली मानवीय त्रासदी के रूप में हमने इसे माना है, जिसकी शुरुआत एक हेल्थ पैंडेमिक के रूप में हुई, परंतु जिसने जल्द ही एक मानवीय सैंडेमिक का रूप लेकर वैश्विक स्तर पर मानव जीवन और आजीविका दोनों के ही सामने एक अभूतपूर्व संकट प्रस्तुत कर दिया है. विभिन्न अनुसंधान रिपोर्ट्स और अनुभव दर्शाते हैं कि कोविड-19 के कारण वैश्विक, राष्ट्रीय, प्रादेशिक, स्थानीय और व्यक्ति के स्तर पर आर्थिक, राजनीतिक, सामाजिक, सांस्कृतिक, हेल्थ और शैक्षणिक मनोवैज्ञानिक प्रणालियों की संरचनात्मक खामियां हैं, वो दृष्टिगोचर हुई है. कोविड महामारी के कारण वैश्विक स्तर पर जीवन और आजीविका बचाने के लिए सूचना और संचार प्रौद्योगिकी के उपयोग द्वारा विभिन्न प्रकार के नवाचार किए गए हैं, जिन्होंने कार्य की दुनिया, वर्ल्ड ऑफ वर्क की रेजिलियंस को बढ़ाकर कार्य की सस्टेनेबिलिटी को पुनः परिभाषित किया है. और जो इस आलेख में मैंने यहाँ पे कुछ प्रश्न हैं जिनका किया है. क्या वर्क फ्रॉम होम कार्य की दुनिया को एक न्यू नॉर्मल के रूप में स्थायी रूप से बदलने वाला है, या यह एक अस्थायी व्यवस्था के रूप में ही अस्तित्व में रहेगा? क्या वर्क फ्रॉम होम डिजिटल डिवाइड को बढ़ाकर पहले से ही विद्यमान विषमता को और अधिक गहरा करने वाला है, या वर्क फ्रॉम होम वैश्विक स्तर पर महिलाओं के आर्थिक सशक्तिकरण का एक ठोस माध्यम बन सकता है, या यह उनके समक्ष एक नवीन चुनौती प्रस्तुत करता है? आदि ऐसे प्रश्न हैं जिन पर अंतर्विषयात्मक दृष्टिकोण से चिंतन और अनुसंधान दोनों ही आवश्यक है. प्रस्तुत आलेख में वर्क फ्रॉम होम के रूप में ऐसे ही नवाचारों का बहुआयामी विश्लेषण किया गया है और साथ ही इस नवीन कार्य संस्कृति के तात्कालिक और दूरगामी प्रभावों का विश्लेषण पोस्ट कोविड विश्व के संदर्भ में किया गया है. सरलतम शब्दों में वर्क फ्रॉम होम से तात्पर्य है कि तकनीकी की सहायता से, जैसे इंटरनेट, लैपटॉप, मोबाइल ऐप्स आदि के माध्यम से कार्यस्थल पर बिना शारीरिक उपस्थिति के घर से ही अपने आर्थिक भूमिका से संबंधित कार्यों के निष्पादन करने से है. यद्यपि वर्क फ्रॉम होम के रूप में यह कार्य संस्कृति कोविड-19 महामारी के पहले भी विद्यमान थी, परंतु पिछले 2 वर्षों या अधिक समय में कोविड-19 संकट के दौरान यह कार्य संस्कृति एक वैश्विक स्तर पर एक न्यू नॉर्मल के रूप में तेजी से उभर रही है और उभरी भी है। वैश्विक लॉकडाउन और सोशल डिस्टेंसिंग के कठोर नियमों के कारण वर्क फ्रॉम होम की नई कार्य संस्कृति ने व्यक्ति को आर्थिक रूप से उपयोगी कार्यों के सुचारू व निरंतर संचालन हेतु एक उपयोगी विकल्प प्रदान किया है। भारत में जहां सेवा क्षेत्र का देश की जीडीपी में सर्वाधिक योगदान है, वहां वर्क फ्रॉम होम की कार्य संस्कृति का विशेष रूप से महत्व है। यही कारण है कि कोविड संकट के दौरान विभिन्न व्यवसायों और कॉरपोरेट संगठनों ने अपने कर्मचारियों को वर्क फ्रॉम होम की सुविधा देकर देश की अर्थव्यवस्था को सक्रिय बनाए रखने में योगदान दिया। कोविड महामारी के दौरान न्यू नॉर्मल के रूप में वर्क फ्रॉम होम की कार्य संस्कृति ने व्यक्ति के जीवन के विभिन्न पहलुओं को अभूतपूर्व रूप से प्रभावित किया है। व्यक्ति के यहाँ पे हम बात करेंगे तो जो वर्क फ्रॉम होम है, इससे जो कार्य की जो संस्कृति है उसके सकारात्मक और नकारात्मक दोनों ही प्रकार के प्रभाव पड़े हैं। जैसे समय की पर्याप्त बचत, धन की बचत, सॉफ्ट स्किल्स का डेवलपमेंट, विशिष्ट जनों के लिए भी ये उपयोगी रहा है और अधिक स्वास्थ्यवर्धक रहा। इसने मेंटल और फिजिकल दोनों ही हेल्थ को इम्प्रूव किया है। कार्य की दुनिया में अधिक सस्टेनेबल, रेसिलिएंट और समावेशी बनाने में यह मददगार रहा। महिलाओं के आर्थिक सशक्तिकरण में ये सहायक रहा। उन्हें नए कार्य क्षेत्र के अधिक अवसर उन्हें प्राप्त हुए। कार्य दशाओं और अवधि में उनके फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी लाने में यह सहायक रहा। वर्क लाइफ बैलेंस में इसकी इंपॉर्टेंस रही और डिजिटल इंडिया और स्किल इंडिया जैसे मिशन है उनकी सफलता में भी इसने काफी महत्वपूर्ण रोल अपना निभाया है। और इसके साथ हम देखते हैं तो इसने कुछ चुनौतियां भी हमारे समक्ष रखी है, जैसे एकाकीपन या सोशल फुटप्रिंट हम जिसे कहते हैं उसको संकुचित कर दिया है। अधिक खर्चीली प्रणाली है, ओवरवर्क हो गया, ओवरलोडेड हो गया, ओवरलोड, अनुशासन की थोड़ी सी कमी आ गई, डिजिटल डिवाइड में बढ़ोतरी हो गई, वर्क जेंडर गैप में बढ़ोतरी हो गई। अगर कंक्लूडिंग रिमार्क में हम देखें तो निष्कर्ष रूप से हम यह कह सकते हैं कि भले ही वर्क फ्रॉम होम की कार्य संस्कृति ने व्यक्ति के समक्ष अनुकूलन की विभिन्न चुनौतियां प्रस्तुत की, परंतु इसमें कोई संदेह नहीं कि वर्क फ्रॉम होम की नवीन कार्य संस्कृति ने व्यक्ति की डिजिटल लिटरेसी, उसकी स्किल, उसकी उत्पादकता में बढ़ोतरी की। थैंक यू सो मच। थैंक यू सो मच।
हमारी
थैंक यू सो मच।
लेकिन बहुत खुशी की बात है कि हमने 5 प्रेजेंटेशन देखे और बाजू में भी 4 महिलाओं के। अगर हम इस हॉल की आबादी देखेंगे तो वीमेन आर द आउट नंबर। आप महिलाओं ने हम पुरुषों को बिल्कुल माइनस कर दिया है, तो आपका बहुत बहुत अभिनंदन। ओके, एंड दिस वेरी गुड।
Thank you, sir.
We are going to have 2 more presentation, and even that is by the women presenter. So first is going to be Dr. Preeti Raj, my colleague from Banasari Vidyapith, and I am also inviting Dr. Sanika to follow her. Dr. Preeti Raj, over to you.
Thank you, sir. A very good morning to.
Please clarify yourself within 4.5 minutes.
Yes, sir. I'll be just precise in my presentation. Thank you so much, sir. A very good morning. A very good morning to all the delegates present there, the organizing committee and all members who are present here. I'll be discussing a bit on the topic which I have selected for my presentation, and that is financial literacy and women's economic rights, a path towards sustainable development. And I would like, in the initial stage, I would like to mention that this particular topic had been my PhD study. So I got the opportunity to work with a number of organizations who are delivering services for the well-being of the rural women. Now, talking about the financial inclusion, it is said that in the recent years, globally, financial inclusion has been one of the main pillars of economic development, especially in the developing countries. Now, when we talk about financial literacy, it is something which promotes financial inclusion through which an individual develops an understanding and skills in how to utilize, to spend and save money, as well as the most important part is enhancing the person's ability in decision-making for using the financial resources. I'll be quite precise, and I had gone through a number of research studies which has emphasized on the present scenario where only a limited number of population, that is only 14% of the Indian adults are concerned of their savings. There's a big gender gap where we get to see that 73% of the men are financially illiterate, while 80% of the women are financially illiterate. Now, keeping in mind the goals of the Sustainable Development Goal, I had taken into consideration two major goals. One is the goal 1, which talks about how to eradicate or alleviate poverty. And the target is basically the vulnerable sections, ensuring that they must be able to access to the basic resources and services. And on the other hand, I had emphasized on goal 5, which ensures gender equality. While I was reviewing the literatures, I got to know that there are a number of studies which focus on the contribution of NGOs. But when we talk about the contribution or the role of NGOs in promoting financial literacy among their target groups, that is quite minimal. So keeping in mind the situation, I decided to go for my study, and it was a mixed method research where I tried to identify 10 organizations who are delivering their services on economic upliftment of rural women by involving them in self-help groups. So these organizations are actually working on these programs for more than 10 years. My sample study focused on women who were, the sample was being selected through stratified random sampling with a sample of 402 women. Since it is a mixed method research, so on one side, I try to assess the level of or the way the organizations are delivering the services for the benefit of these women, how they are promoting their decision-making power, other than only involving them in thrift and credit, because in most of the SHGs, we get to see that women are only focusing on the thrift and credit. But other than that, how these women are coming forward and being involved in inter and intra loaning, how they are being linked with the banks, that was another big factor. So on one side, I try to assess the participation, the involvement of these organizations, their contribution, and of course, how these women were being influenced by the contribution of the organizations. For this, definitely the same questions which I had put on, I had developed a questionnaire and I shared with the organization's heads, and they had shared their views, and both open-ended and closed-ended questions were there. And based on that, I also carried out focus group discussions where these questions were being shared with the members of the SHGs who gave their views, how they are practicing their rights, how much they are aware about their knowledge and understanding. For this, I have even shared the case studies, and I have mentioned that in my paper. The outcome of the study was basically being observed that NGOs are giving their utmost to enhance the capacity of the clients. Definitely, women are being involved in taking decision in the money management. But one more thing is that has been observed was that they confirm what they are going to do before they confirm from the family before they go for the expense. They are more concerned about their family members. Yes, sir.
Your crystal observation, okay, and yeah. Final anecdote from this time.
So I have and I'll just wind up. Thank you, sir. It has been observed that because the members were between the age group of 20 to 65 years, it was being observed that the younger SHG members were quite active in adopting the various services, including digital literacy. But in case of the women who were above the age of 45 years, it was definitely a big problem for them, and they had to depend on other members. So thank you, sir. I won't extend more. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being clear. Yeah, Dr. Sanika.
Yes, good morning to all. Am I audible?
You are audible.
Okay, the topic of my presentation is examining the relationship between precarious employment, eudaimonic well-being, and job performance. First of all, I would like to share the recent news that is of the happiness index. It is a comprehensive survey instrument that assesses happiness, well-being, and aspects of sustainability and resilience. And India has been ranked 139 out of 149 countries in the list of UN World Happiness Report 2021. As we know, So employment of a person plays crucial role in raising the index of well-being and quality of life. And precarious nature of employment poses a threat to the happiness, well-being, and aspects of sustainability and resilience of people. So it is important to design the employment with least detriments. The term precarious was introduced by a French sociologist in 1980s to explain temporary or seasonal work. As the job arrangements are becoming more temporary of nature, insecurity and instability among workers is common now. So present study focuses on the level and severity of precarious employments prevailing in higher educational institutions of Chandigarh, Himachal Pradesh and Punjab. During lockdown, temporary employees faced job or salary cuts by many higher educational institutions across the nation. Ad hoc, temporary, self-finance, contract, guest faculty, these terms itself explains the precarious nature of job that is very unstable and fragile. Even before the pandemic began, this group of temporary employees has had a very difficult time and experience. Even if a qualified, overqualified teacher manages to search out employment, life ahead for such temporary employees is generally unstable, unsustainable, and humiliating. So considering the case of contract faculty in HEIS, the situation of teachers is dire as they do not have platforms to raise the voice for their genuine issues. So I have taken the eudaimonic approach of well-being that is defined as happiness or contentment that is achieved through self-actualization and has meaningful purpose in one's life. And the third variable is job performance, that is the total expected value to the organization of the discrete behavioral uh, uh, aspects that an individual carries out over a standard period of time. So the present empirical study proves that precarious jobs worsen the effectiveness of employee well-being, which further hinders job performance in the workplace. The conceptual model has three variables, and on the basis of their dimensions using standardized scales, a questionnaire is formed to measure the level of precarious employment, eudaimonic well-being, and job performance. The objective of the study is to examine the level of precarious employment and its association with eudaimonic well-being and job performance among temporary faculty working in various HEIS of Chandigarh, Himachal Pradesh, and Punjab. Correspondingly, hypotheses of the studies are designed, and the data from ASHE report 2019-20 is considered to draw a sample using snowball sampling method. Descriptive analysis and correlation analysis is done through SPSS software. The findings, talking about the findings, the study empirically proves the severity of precarious employment in HAS. The data reveals that compensation and temporariness are the major detriments. Correlation analysis reveals that precarious jobs worsen the effectiveness of employee well-being, which further hinders job performance in workplace. Eudaimonic well-being is an important determinant of employee performance. So the HEIS should concentrate more on permanent faculty posts. Future research can be done on precarious employment with variables like employee retention, commitment, etc. Also study with differentiation on demographic variables like gender, age, marital status, etc. can be done. So in the end, I would like to conclude with a quote that if something doesn't bring peace, profit, or purpose, then don't give it your time, energy, and attention. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. And it was a very wonderful presentation, within the time, very focused, and imbibed with a lot of learning implication.
Thank you, sir.
I'm going to ask the audience to put their hands together for your presentation.
Thank you.
Did you listen to all class? Did you listen all this class?
Sir, I thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Because we listened your presentation, so you should listen our class also. Yeah, and friends, you need to be attentive because I'm going to reserve 5 minutes for you, and I'm going to collect the insight from you with one word or one sentence. So you need to be highly attentive. Because we are listening to all people online and physically we are here. So our contribution is to be there in this forum. So now we are having Mahendra Khori.
Yes, sir. I am here, sir. Thank you so much, sir. I'm really, thank you so much, sir. I'm really feeling privileged to have this opportunity to share my views on the kind of post-pandemic society or the world we are heading, collectively heading to, using my sociological imagination. And by focusing my sociological lens, I'm going to talk about, in nutshell, the general trends or shifts that have been triggered by COVID-19 crisis during the last almost 2 years in various dimensions of human experience and existence. Sir, we can see COVID-19 as the biggest enemy of humanity, as a greatest teacher, and a ruthless humiliator at the same time. As the biggest enemy, or as the enemy number one of the humanity in the 21st century, COVID-19 has posed many serious existential challenges to human lives and livelihoods worldwide. Beginning as a health crisis, COVID-19 soon gave birth to many other crises in the economic, political, and socio-cultural domains of human life. The word shadow pandemic has been used to highlight the steep rise in the cases of domestic violence against women across the board. As the greatest teacher, COVID-19 has taught us many important lessons to guide our ways of thinking and doing in the post-pandemic era. Individuals, businesses, organizations, industries, countries, etc., all have learned some hard lessons during their efforts towards navigating through the challenges and risks posed by COVID-19 crisis. Again, as the biggest stressor and a ruthless humiliator, COVID-19 has exposed us all by making us realize that how wrong we were in making the claim or taking the pride in claiming ourselves as the greatest creation on this planet and the supreme master of our destiny. A tiny virus has made the entire humanity bent down on its knees. It has exposed the fragility and precariousness of the rituals of individual behavior, gender relations, patterns of community engagement, healthcare system, business, trade, and industrial ecosystems, institutional infrastructure, multilateral governance mechanism, civil society institutions, governmental and bureaucratic principles and processes. Undoubtedly, COVID-19 has changed our world forever. Due to the paucity of time, it is of no use to mention the deep statistics related with the GDP, job losses, poverty, migration, number of deaths worldwide, which were collected to measure the magnitude of the devastating impact of COVID-19 crisis on the human lives. Sir, it goes without saying that the seismic events unleashed by the COVID-19 pandemic have the power to redefine and reshape the world we live in, changing it in ways we have never ever imagined so far. For many analysts, COVID-19 is the reboot button or a great reset that will trigger a system-wide overhaul in the coming times. The post-pandemic world is definitely going to be significantly different in terms of the ways we live, we work, and we use technology. COVID-19 has ushered in unprecedented new realities in both the private and public domains of human life. Various research studies and reports show that COVID-19 has given birth to many consequential results that have the potential to transform the economic, political, socio-cultural, health, educational, ecological, and ideological landscapes at both the micro and macro levels. Therefore, it is obvious that this crisis has posed an interdisciplinary challenge to grasp its multifaceted causes, consequences, and precariousness for human lives. Experts from various disciplines are approaching this crisis from various perspectives and hunting for the answers related with the changes and challenges, both proximate and remote, brought by this pandemic. Apart from being only a health crisis or a health pandemic challenging the disease control and crisis management capabilities of both the developed and developing nations, COVID-19 pandemic is certainly going to affect states, governments, markets, geopolitics, socio-cultural institutions and practices, psychological and socio-psychological parameters, preferences and priorities of individuals and groups in many substantive and far-reaching ways. This is why many commentators prefer to call COVID-19 a syndemic. Our transition from the pre-COVID-19 old normal through during COVID-19 new normal to final the post-COVID-19 next normal has prepared a solid ground for academic discourse and interdisciplinary research. Here, the responsibilities of the practitioners of social sciences become particularly crucial in identifying the multifaceted nature and dimensions of this next normal. Moreover, the responsibility of social scientists does not end with just capturing the true nature of this next normal, but it is also incumbent upon them to contribute their part in redesigning this next normal in the best of all possible ways and to ensure that it is going to be more sustainable, more resilient, more inclusive, and more capable of coping with the coming crises and challenges to human conditions in the coming future. There are some hard questions to be asked, like to what extent the next normal is going to be quantitatively different from the pre-COVID human condition. Has COVID-19 marked the death of globalization as we know it today? Has COVID-19 pushed the entire humanity towards a whole new kind of human existence? Has COVID-19 necessitated the overhauling of our value systems? What are the lessons this pandemic has taught us? Has neoliberal capitalism come to its end, or is it changing its form and content to take the shape of a surveillance capitalism or a shareholder capitalism? What roles are to be played by multilateral institutions, national governments, civil society organizations, media, and individuals in shaping the post-COVID-19 world? Has COVID-19 exposed the vulnerabilities, fragilities, and frailties of the existing order of things? How the experience of COVID-19 on multiple levels going to re-engineer our priorities about lives, livelihoods, and lifestyles? How has COVID-19 made it imperative to reconceptualize the philosophies of humanism and individualism? Are some of the thorny questions which require fact-based and data-driven analysis and answers, and surely serious efforts in this direction will substantiate our ability to sketch out the prerequisites for building back better in the post-pandemic world. Now, let us talk about the various changes or shifts or emerging trends that are not only characterized.
Dr. Mahendra, let us not talk, let us conclude. Let us conclude this.
Okay, sir. Just a sec, sir. Having said all this, I can conclude that the messages and lessons of COVID-19 are very clear. It is up to us what extent we are ready to be future ready by ensuring our wholehearted actions towards making our world a more resilient, sustainable, inclusive, and a fairer place to live in. The greatest lesson that I can mention once again is that we are all in this together, that what affects a single person anywhere affects everyone everywhere, that as Homo sapiens, we need to think and act unitedly rather than worrying about race, religion, caste, class, ethnicity, nationality, economic status, and such artificial groupings. If we really want to bounce back and reaffirm our commitment towards building back better imperative, we must make combined efforts to usher in an era of global cooperation, global collaboration, and global consciousness in the 21st century. This is all from my side, sir. Thank you so much for giving me patient hearing, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Mahendra. Very theoretically and conceptually clear. Only problem was that online and offline, these both forms are different. See, 2020 is a different form, text form is a different form. But unfortunately, as a seasoned teacher, हम लोग online में भी ना offline की तरह पढ़ाते हैं, and that's why we should become little less powerful. Anyway, we are going to have four presentations from the board, and again from the all women presenter. One is going to be Anita Meena, then Switi Mathu, and finally Anuradha Sharma is going to basically present. And the gentleman. Okay. We have to be now sensitive with the minority people. Yeah. So Anita Meena. Are you going to be there? Are you there? Okay, this was the additive में इन्होंने खुद आके अपना नाम दिया था, लेकिन प्रत्याशी ने अपना नामांकन वापस लिया है. बहुत धन्यवाद. Okay, आगे बढ़ते हैं. स्मृति माथुर जी. स्मृति माथुर जी, are you going to be there? आप नहीं होंगे तो हमें बोलने का मौका मिलेगा. वो चेयरपर्सन would be very happy. अगर कोई नहीं बोलेगा तो हमें थोड़ा मौका मिलेगा. Harnaam Singh ji, opportunity is knocking your door.
Sir, good morning, sir. Namaskar, sir.
नमस्कार. आपके पास केवल 4 मिनट है. उसके साथ न्याय.
ओके सर. सर, मेरा जो टॉपिक है वो है सतत कृषि विकास के लिए प्रादेशिकरण, एक केस स्टडी ऑफ द चाकसू तहसील. प्रादेशिकरण एक सस्टेनेबल एग्रीकल्चर प्लानिंग के लिए एक आधारभूत स्तंभ है. प्रेजेंट टाइम में तीव्र जनसंख्या वृद्धि और उच्च घनत्व के कारण मानव अल्प संसाधनों पर बोझ प्रतीत होता है. तो प्रादेशिकरण की सहायता से उसका अपन नियोजन करके अपन किसी भी क्षेत्र में वहां की क्लाइमेट, सॉइल, अवेलेबिलिटी ऑफ वाटर, वर्षा की मात्रा का अध्ययन करके हम ये ज्ञात कर सकते हैं कि उस निर्धारित क्षेत्र के अंदर कौन कौन सी फसलें बोई जानी चाहिए जिससे कि अधिक जनसंख्या का भरण पोषण लंबे समय तक हो सके। अध्ययन क्षेत्र चाकसू जिला मुख्यालय जयपुर से 40 किलोमीटर दूर दक्षिण पूर्व में स्थित है। अध्ययन क्षेत्र में 3 हेलो हेलो अध्ययन क्षेत्र में तीनों संसाधन भूमि हेलो
बोलिए ना।
अध्ययन क्षेत्र अध्ययन क्षेत्र में तीनों संसाधन भूमि, मानव और जल तीनों सीमित मात्रा में उपलब्ध है और किसी भी कृषि प्रधान क्षेत्र में इन तीनों संसाधनों का संभावित उपयोग विकास प्रक्रिया को सुदृढ़ आधार प्रदान कर प्रादेशिकरण को सरल बनाता है। अध्ययन क्षेत्र के अंदर कुल 57 पटवार मंडल है जिसके अंदर 295 गांव है, 295 विलेजेस पे इन सभी डेटाओं को इकट्ठा किया गया है। पूरे स्टडी एरिया का जो टोटल ज्योग्राफिकल एरिया वो 78,000 हेक्टेयर है। इसके बीच में से एक ढूंढ निकलती है और जिसकी पूर्वी सीमा मोरेल नदी के द्वारा निर्धारित होती है। तो फलस्वरूप अध्ययन क्षेत्र में सिंचाई या भूमिगत जल का एकमात्र साधन ढूंढ एवं मोरेल नदी है। तहसील की जो क्लाइमेटिक कंडीशन है वो सेमी एरिड टाइप की है और यहाँ पे वर्षा का जो औसत है वो 675 मिलीमीटर है जी। यहाँ की सॉइल वो बलुई, दोमट और चिकनी मृदा है और नीचे से सिल्क युक्त है। सिंचाई योग्य जो पानी है वो भी लवणीय एवं क्षारीय है जिससे दिन प्रतिदिन समस्याग्रस्त भूमि का क्षेत्र लगातार बढ़ता जा रहा है। तो इस अध्ययन क्षेत्र के अंतर्गत फसल गहनता सूचकांक निकाला गया जिसमें 57 पटवार मंडल में से मात्र 18 पटवार मंडल ही ऐसे थे जहां पर फसल गहनता सूचकांक अत्यधिक कम था। तो अध्ययन क्षेत्र के अंदर पानी की अत्यधिक कमी के कारण यहाँ पर फसल विविधताकरण अधिक पाया गया है और फसल विविधता अधिकरण का पाने का मुख्य कारण पानी की कमी की वजह से किसान अधिक फसलें बोता है जिससे कि किसी फसल में उसको नुकसान होता है तो किसी उसकी क्षतिपूर्ति वो दूसरी फसल के द्वारा की जा सकती है। अध्ययन क्षेत्र का अध्ययन करने के पश्चात प्रथम और द्वितीय क्रम की फसलों का निर्धारण किया गया प्रादेशिकरण की सहायता से। उसमें यह निकल के आया कि अध्ययन क्षेत्र की जो प्रमुख फसल है जो वो है सरसों है जो कि मुख्यतः रबी की फसल है जो कि 57 पटवार मंडल में से लगभग 40 पटवार मंडल के अंदर सरसों की फसल बोई जाती है। दूसरे नंबर की जो फसल है इसके अंदर है वो है बाजरा जो कि 30 पटवार मंडल में बोई जाती है, वो है द्वितीय कोटि की प्रमुख फसल है। अब बाजरा जो है वो खरीफ की फसल है, यहाँ पानी की कमी की वजह से ये खरीफ की फसल है बोई जाती है। और दूसरी जो सरसों की फसल है जो मुख्यतः रबी की फसल है वो भी एक बरानी कृषि की जाती है, सरसों की फसल भी कम पानी के अंदर की जाती है। इस तरह से इस अध्ययन क्षेत्र में यह अध्ययन किया गया है कि पानी की कमी की वजह से वहां पे उपलब्ध संसाधनों के आधार पर किस प्रकार की भूमि उस प्रकार की भूमि पे कृषि की जाए जिससे अधिक जनसंख्या का सतत पोषणीय विकास संभव हो सके। थैंक यू सर। थैंक यू सर।
एक तो आपके भूमि पर वो मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगा और बिल्कुल एफएम के जमाने में जब कृषि दर्शन पैनल लगता है मतलब दिन दर बोलता है तो ये भी मुझे
थैंक यू सर। थैंक यू।
Yes. Now we are going to have a second class presentation, class online mode, that is from Sweden Sociology. और उसके बाद अलग-अलग समय दिए आप यहाँ पे Yes, given the name. अरे हमने आयोजन ये किया था कि ऑफलाइन से शुरुआत होती है और एक भी ऑफलाइन से we have arranged it. Last presentation, Sweden Sociology. लेकिन समय केवल 4 दिन की है।
गुड मॉर्निंग सर।
इस प्रकार से परिवार नियोजन का विषय है, उसी प्रकार से समय का भी नियोजन होना चाहिए।
गुड मॉर्निंग सर।
क्या नाम है?
मैम आप मुझे सुन पा रही हैं? हाँ जी सर। आदरणीय मंच व उपस्थित सभी शिक्षक गणों को मेरा सादर प्रणाम। मेरा आज का विषय है सतत विकास और जीवन गुणवत्ता, परिवार व्यवस्था और सामाजिक संबंध। सतत विकास और गुणवत्तापूर्ण जीवन महामारी के पश्चात समाज की आवश्यकता, अर्थात महामारी पश्चात समाज जीवन पद्धति के प्रतिमानों को पुनः समाज की आवश्यकता अनुरूप संरचित करने की आवश्यकता है। सतत विकास मात्र एक आर्थिक विकास नहीं है, अपितु न्यायपूर्ण समाज की स्थापना से है। महामारी के पश्चात व्यक्ति अनेक चुनौतियों का सामना समाज को करना पड़ रहा है। इसी संदर्भ में परिवार व्यवस्था और सामाजिक संबंध विषय के माध्यम से मैं अपना अवलोकन प्रस्तुत करती हूँ। सतत विकास, विकास जो भविष्य की पीढ़ियों को अपनी जरूरतों को पूरा करने की क्षमता से समझौता किए बिना वर्तमान की जरूरतों को पूरा करता है। दूसरे शब्दों में सतत विकास ऐसा विकास है जो आने वाली पीढ़ियों के हितों में से समझौता किए बिना वर्तमान पीढ़ी की आवश्यकताओं को पूरा करता है। साथ ही प्राकृतिक संसाधनों और पारिस्थितिक तंत्र सेवाओं को प्रदान करने के लिए प्राकृतिक प्रणालियों की क्षमता को बनाए रखता है, जिस प्रकार अर्थव्यवस्था और समाज कल्याण। जीवन की स्थायी गुणवत्ता, जीवन की गुणवत्ता वह विस्तार है जिसे व्यक्ति अपने कार्य और अपने संबंधों में संतुलन प्राप्त करके एक अच्छे जीवन का आनंद लेता है, जो स्वयं और दूसरों के साथ पर्याप्त स्थिति बनाने और बनाए रखने, जीवन के दौरान अपनी क्षमता को बनाए रखने के लिए होता है। महामारी के पश्चात के मुद्दे या कहूँ तो चुनौतियां, प्रभावित परिवार कल्याण, आय असमानता, सामाजिक डिस्कनेक्ट, बेरोजगारी, काम और जीवन संतुलन बनाए रखना, वस्तु और सेवाओं की कीमतों में वृद्धि। परिवार और सामाजिक संबंध जो कि इसका केंद्र बिंदु है। परिवार समाज की एक आधारशिला है और हमारे देश के आर्थिक विकास का इंजन है। परिवार हालांकि विविध जटिल और प्रकृति में गतिशील है। पारिवारिक जीवन और अपेक्षाओं को समझना महत्वपूर्ण है। पारिवारिक अनुभव व परिवार की सामाजिक प्रगति और विकास के पीछे प्रेरक शक्ति है। महामारी के पश्चात समाज, परिवार व्यवस्था और सामाजिक संबंधों से बहुत सी पूर्व अपेक्षाएं हैं। व्यक्तिगत रूप से आमने सामने के संबंधों का महत्व बहुत ही स्पष्ट हो गया है। परिवार और सामाजिक संबंधों का महत्व कोरोना काल में स्पष्ट छाप छोड़ गया है। कोरोना संकट के बीच हमारे समाज ने लंबा लॉकडाउन देखा। महामारी के इस चुनौती के बीच हम सब घरों में रहने को मजबूर हो गए थे, लेकिन इस मजबूरी ने जहां जीवन जीने के तरीके को बदल दिया है, वहीं पुराने संबंधों के प्रति एक ऊर्जा का दोबारा पैदा होना विकसित होता है। विलासितापूर्ण जीवन और आधुनिकता में डूब जाने अनजाने में ऐसी बहुत सी चीजें हैं जो विलासिता और आधुनिकता के दौर के कारण प्रकृति से दूर हो गए थे। पश्चिमी सभ्यता का अंधाधुनीकरण, सुविधापूर्ण जीवन शैली जीते जीते भारतीय परंपरा, सच्ची खुशी, बच्चों का बचपन और सही मायने में खुशहाल जीवन से दूर होते चले गए थे। स्पष्ट कहूं तो कोरोना से पहले की जिंदगी और बाद की जिंदगी कितना अंतर है आया है। इसमें व्यक्ति, परिवार, समाज, सामाजिक संबंधों के महत्व को बखूबी से समझ पाया है और साथ ही आधुनिकता की इस दौड़ में पूर्णतः सामाजिक संबंधों का हास होता देखा जा रहा था, जिसे इन कठोर परिस्थितियों ने पुनः परिवार और सामाजिक संबंधों जो कि एक समाज की नींव है को पुनः मजबूत किया है। परिवार और सामाजिक संबंध समाज रूपी शरीर की रीढ़ की हड्डी के समान है। वायरस हमारी मानसिक शक्ति का परीक्षण करना जारी रखेगा और समाज में मौजूद असमानताओं को बढ़ाता है और अधिक से अधिक स्थिति के लिए प्रेरित करता है और मकसद को नए रास्ते पर ले जाता है। धन्यवाद सर।
time is going to cross. We are going to do injustice with Deepaji. Is she present physically here? क्या करें? छोड़ दे. Yes, friends, I wish to thank all of you because these people, though did fairly justice with their topic, but they have exploited our sensitivity. I must appreciate your sensitivity, you know, despite of all technical glitches.
That means difficulties and certain disabilities on all sides. I must appreciate your sensitivity, your accommodation, and the before I invite you to comment from the stage here, and so there was a next space available from the question answer session. I just wish to go only 2 minutes. Your insights on your comment of any question, we both of you take care of your question, and we have the expert level available for you. तो अगर आपके मन में आपके जहन में कोई भी सवाल या कोई भी इंसाइट है या कोई भी प्रश्न अगर है तो लास्ट 2 मिनट्स फॉर यू हाउ वी गो shall I rotate the mic like this yeah
Anybody has any question?
Okay, then last 5 minutes with us now. Okay, हमने टोटल 11 प्रेजेंटेशन सुने, 11 में से 8 महिलाओं ने प्रेजेंट किया और मैं बोल रहा हूँ केवल 3 पुरुषों ने किया. तो अभी वो 3 पुरुषों की थोड़ी वृद्धि राजीव जी और मेरे द्वारा होगी. तो वी विल ट्राई टू मेक द इक्विलिब्रियम टू द टाइटल सस्टेनेबल.
पुरुष माइनॉरिटी में रहे तो समाज में संतुलन कैसा होगा उसको संवेदनशील हम पूरी की बात होनी चाहिए वी विल ट्राई टू अकॉम्प्लिश दैट if you utmost respect लेकिन आपकी एक समय का अनुरोध है केवल 3 मिनट
फिक्स बोलना पड़ेगा तो जाएगी आवाज.
I have, it's really notable that the presenters have taken care of all these conditions. And the pandemic, it seems, has had a major impact on not only on the society but also on the thinking mindset of the presenters of the papers. The anonymous have really take that out for. because I haven't been given too much of time, otherwise I would have liked to comment on some of the papers also, but I don't think I would be able to do justice to that. But I found some papers very interesting, particularly the papers presented by Vedant Swami. He talked about the unparalleled, unrivaled, and unprecedented threat to the institution of taxing, and how it brought regardless of the fact that the families were financially and socially very resourceful. Srinath talked about the background of the pundits resulting from their influence from Kashmir and how they were handled later. Safety Graham talked about the sustainability. Sharma's paper was on online teaching, and was an interesting one. He brought out how Sunita Marga talked about the novel work culture which is emerged from. So the distinguishing line between the work and home has been almost erased by the pandemic situation. Although opportunities, particularly for women empowerment, have emerged from this. E. Raj talked about financial literacy and women's economic rights. Soliva has the precarious into that, which I think is a novel area of research which has been brought out. Mahendra Sori's paper was quite interesting about the sustainability and the quest for reimagining resilience in a post-pandemic world. Anita, Meena, and Preeti Mathur were not there. Harnam Singh's paper was quite interesting about the the ground realities of how agriculture is being challenged by the threat to the water resources. And Sweetie Mathur talked about the impact of the lockdown and the need for a just society, etc. The pandemic has really shown that the risks in the society have become multiplied manifold. And new kinds of threats have emerged to life and livelihood and the basic fundamental institutions of society that we are all very well aware of. And so in this new scenario, I would like to emphasize that it's not just the access to things like food and water and education, which are the prerequisites of a dignified life, but the idea of social security, it becomes even more strongly felt need in the present context. And all the governments and all the states should rethink on those lines. And the basic social security mechanisms should be provided to the civilians, to the ordinary man, because how, when, and to what extent life is going to be threatened, disease is going to be confronted with, and the resources are being diminished in all aspects, in all ways. And all that makes it a very scary situation for the common man to look into. So it has emerged from the papers also in different ways, what kind of threats, new threats are being posed to the civil society today. And I think I would, there is a need to re-emphasize and very strongly emphasize the need for social security measures in this new scenario. And sustainability is going to rest on not just food, water, and education, but on social security. So this is, before the chairperson asks me to close down, I will thank him for giving me the opportunity to say a few words. I thank the organizers, Professor Rashmi Jain and her marvelous team who has organized such a good conference, and to all the fellow participants and all the fellow students, researchers, and scholars who are here attending this conference. And your presence itself is very rejuvenating, and you have given a very a very considerate kind of hearing to all the participants and to the organizers. So hats off to you also. And with all this, I hand over the mic back to the chairperson, Professor Jadhav.
Yeah, thank you very much. Since Madam has taken extra 2 minutes, we need to minus our minute. Only 90 seconds for you, sir. आपके लिए 1.5 मिनट और मेरे लिए 1.5 मिनट. हमने आपको 90 मिनट सुना, तो कम से कम 90 सेकंड तो हम दोनों को मिलने चाहिए, बेचारे असहाय पुरुषों को.
In fact, who is sir? Sure, sir. I will try to finish in less than 90 minutes. I have, in fact, examined, evaluated, and listened the today's papers and the yesterday's papers. One note which I would like to mention only, sir, and I think everybody will share it. All papers reveal one startling fact that there is de-idealization of social sciences. No theory, no ideological construction, simple empirical dimensions. Lack of history. Manish sir, it is a very alarming situation. If Kashmir is examined, nobody is talking about T.N. Madan. Nobody is talking about Dogras Naresh. Nobody is talking about Ashok Pandey. In all important papers, they are empirically very rich. They have mentioned several informations. But if ideological roots or theoretical roots are not there, then probably we cannot raise questions or we cannot show concern regarding the role of the state, role of the market, and even the role of the society. In fact, this is a very, very alarming situation. And if we do not regulate it, we do not control it, then I was mentioning this fact to Rashmi, nobody can stop the decline of social sciences in a subcontinent like India. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do believe in me, I am not going to take more than 2 minutes. मैं पहले चाहूंगा कि आप लोग खुद के लिए तालियां बजाओ, क्योंकि हम लोग सुबह 10:30 बजे से बैठे हैं और हम लोग चाय का इंतजार कर रहे हैं. और मैं जानता हूं कि चेयरपर्सन कितने मिनट बोलेगा. ओके, तो मैं आपकी भी व्यवस्था समझ सकता हूं. मैं एक बार आपसे फिर से तालियां का समर्थन चाहूंगा. वो बेचारे 16 लोग बैठे हैं और वो ऑनलाइन में अक्सर लोग अपना पेपर प्रेजेंट करके भाग जाते हैं, but still they are there. I wish to express my gratitude to my 2 senior colleagues. One is of course Deepa Mathur ji and Rajiv Gupta ji. Thank you for being with us, and thank you Rashmi ji for inviting us. My last 1 minute is that मुझे लगता है कि हम लोग अपने सारे पुरुष सत्ताकता के, समाज के असंतुलन के बिल कोरोना के नाम पे फाड़ रहे हैं. बहुत सारे पेपर में कहा गया कि कोरोना के समय में डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस बढ़ा, गरीबी का एक बहुत अनचाहा प्रदर्शन दिखा. एज अ प्रैक्टिशनर सोशियोलॉजिस्ट मैं ये हकीकत को स्वीकार करता हूं कि समाज में ये सारी परिस्थितियां पहले से थी, कोरोना ने बस इसका एक विभत्स प्रदर्शन हम लोगों के सामने रखा और बजाय कुछ करने के बजाय हम लोग बस एक मानवीय असहायता का प्रदर्शन कर रहे हैं। और दुर्भाग्य से अगर कोई भी सेमिनार, इफ यू आर नॉट अराइविंग एन एनी एक्शन पॉइंट, any mandate, any declaration, this seminar is going to be the one additive chapter in that. तो आप सब लोगों से मेरा निवेदन ये रहेगा कि आज की जो हमारा अंतिम सत्र जो रहेगा, we should come out with certain declaration, and that declaration should start from my action point, that what I am going to make this society more sustainable. And my last concluding word, I need to be locally relevant. मैं दुनिया भर की बातें कर रहा हूँ कि ग्लोबल में ये होना चाहिए, कंट्री में ये होना चाहिए, बट अनलेस आई एम गोइंग टू बी रिलेवेंट इन माय लोकल कॉन्टेक्स्ट, all this academic has no value. My second point is that I need to be a socially significant. If my academic, my action, my discourses are not going to be socially significant, okay, then probably this is going to be the another tamasha. And my third thing is that if I am going to be locally relevant, if I am going to be the socially significant, you take assurance from my side, okay, as we are the citizen of the global world, okay, I am not the leftist like the Rajiv Gupta ji and as senior like him, okay, I do believe that we are in a global world, we have to believe in a fair competition. Of course, we need to believe all such guidelines, but if you are going to be the locally relevant and socially significant, Rajiv Gupta ji, definitely we are going to be a globally competent society, and this competency need to be followed the principle of cooperation as regard to having my senior colleagues. So thanks for your gracious presence, sir. Thank you, madam, for your invitation, and thank you, wonderful gathering, for listening us patiently. Thank you very much. My 1.5 minute over.
Thank you, sir. Now we have come to the end of this session. On behalf of the Department of Sociology, I present my sincere thanks to Professor Jagdish Jadhav sir, Head and Dean, Department of Social Work, Central University of Rajasthan, Kishangarh, for chairing today's session. I must mention our profound sense of appreciation for not only meticulously managing the session well, but also cautiously concluding the session well in time. Thank you, sir, for sharing your insightful and very crisp remarks. I'm sure it will benefit all the participants today. I would also like to extend my thanks to Professor Deepa Mathur ma'am, retired Professor, Department of Sociology, University of Rajasthan, for co-chairing today's session and presenting keen insights on the paper presentations today and giving concluding remarks. It was a pleasure having you with us today, ma'am. Thanks is also due to all our presenters who have joined us today, both online and offline. We were fortunate to have academicians from various disciplines. We have certainly been enriched by your views. Thanks to Professor Rashmi Jain ma'am, Head Department, for her constant support, even when it comes to going beyond her comfort zone. And most importantly, our volunteers and enthusiastic audience who have joined us today. Thank you one and all. With this, we conclude this session here, and I invite you all for our second plenary session. I would request everyone to kindly remain seated here, and tea will be. We'll shortly be starting with our second plenary session after the tea break.
There is no tea break. We are having tea in the hall itself, and we're just waiting for the panelists to join. Tulsi Patel ma'am has already joined, and maybe Amithi, you could just find out if the others are there.
Professor Nagaraju here.
So we,
Professor Rashmi ji, Professor Nagaraju here.
Okay, good morning, good morning, good noon now.
Good afternoon. Yes.
Yeah. So we are waiting for Professor Vishwaraksha to join, and we will be good to go because we already have Professor Manish Verma in physical with us. So we will just, I think. Yes, Professor Manish Verma would be coming. मैंने वो नाश्ता तुलसी पटेल, हाँ यहाँ लगा दो बिल्कुल। हाँ? Good noon, Tulsi ma'am.
Good noon, Dr. Rashmi Jain. How are you?
Good, I'm good. Thank you for joining in. We're just beginning in few seconds now.
Okay.
Good afternoon, madam. Tulsi madam. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Prakash Babu.
Nagaraj madam. Nagaraj madam.
Sorry,
I'm
Nagaraj. Yeah.
so happy to see you, madam. I met you several times. I'm from Hyderabad Central University, madam. Namaste, Manish ji. Namaskar. I'm unable to see you, brother, sir. Manish sir.
There is, I saw him yesterday, but can't see him today.
I'm Rajiv Gupta.
Acha, sir. Namaskar, sir. Raju sir. Namaskar.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Dr. Rajiv
Tulsi
Gupta.
ma'am. How are you?
I'm okay. How are you? Nice to have seen you yesterday also.
I am fine.
Tulsi madam, I met you first time in Tirunelveeli, way back to 99. When you were a general secretary, I think you were a treasurer at the time of All India Sociological Society.
Oh my God, I don't remember.
I was a student at that time, you know.
Okay. Where are you now?
I'm in Hyderabad Central University, madam. I'm a professor of
So you will
sociology.
be one of the panelists today.
Yes, yes, madam. Yes. And Professor Chandrasekhar Bhatt, Lakshmi Narayana, Vinod Jayarat, they always remember you. Huh?
Yes, they are a good.
Good
Yes.
afternoon, Tulsi ma'am, Nagaraju sir.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good
afternoon.
With the permission of chair, may I request to start this session?
Yeah, sure.
First of all, thank you so much, ma'am and sir, to join online on time.
That always happens. Online people can be more on time than physically.
Yes, ma'am, of course. Next time we will be having that. Respected dais, dignitaries, guests, colleagues, dear students and scholars, I welcome you all in this plenary session. It is indeed a great pleasure for me to coordinate another scholarly session with the erudite scholar across the country. Some of them are joining with us through online, as we already seen, and some are in person. So thank you all for joining us and enriching this conference with your expertise. This session will be chaired by Professor Tulsi Patel. Panelists would be Professor Nagaraju Gundameda, Professor Vishwaraksha, and Professor Manish Kumar Verma. It's time to introduce to them. Professor Tulsi Patel is a learned and knowledgeable and erudite scholar, retired professor of sociology, Department of Sociology, Delhi School of Economics, University of Delhi, and presently ma'am is chairing SK Dear Chair, Institute of Social Sciences, Basant Kunj, New Delhi. Ma'am is researching on local governance, and she is a scholar in the field of gender, family, kinship, and marriage, and also medical sociology, especially in the field of anthropology of reproduction. We welcome you wholeheartedly, ma'am. Professor Nagaraju is from Central University, Hyderabad. His area of teaching and research interest covers sociology of India, sociology of education, sociology of youth, sociology of marginal groups, and information technology. He has carried out research on teacher agency schooling of girls, educational achievement of children, and contested youth identities, a case study of India and South Africa. Professor Nagaraju is awarded with many distinctions like University of Hyderabad Chancellor's Award 2018, Senior Research Fellow, Department of Sociology, University of Johannesburg, South Africa, Joint Secretary, Comparative Education Society of India, and Advisory Editorial Board Member, Sociological Bulletin, and currently he is editor to E-Exploration, E-Journal of Indian Sociological Society. So we welcome you also, sir. Proceeding further, We have with us Professor Vishwaraksha, Head Department of Sociology and Director, Center for Women's Study, University of Jammu. Her area of specialization is gender studies, marginalized groups, subaltern studies, research methodology, folk and media studies, political sociology. Former member of editorial boards of Sociological Bulletin, Journal of Indian Sociological Society, published by SAGE, and Explorations e-Journal of Indian Sociological Society. Ma'am is working in the area of gender and women studies for the last 27 years. She has been associated with many research projects, the latest being the social audit of midday meal scheme in Jammu and Kashmir for the School Education Department of Jammu and Kashmir. With this, we also feel delighted because we have with us Professor Manish Kumar Verma, and that is in person. So special thanks to you, sir. Professor Verma is professor in the Department of Sociology at Babasaheb Bhimrao Ambedkar Central University, Lucknow. Right now, currently, he is holding a position of Secretary, Indian Sociological Society. Earlier, he served as Head and Deputy Coordinator, UGC SAP-DRS First in the Department of Sociology in his university, and Controller of Examinations. Coordinator Sports and Assistant Proctor of the University, obtained doctoral degree from JNU Delhi, has more than 23 years of teaching and research experience, which includes more than 8 years in the capacity of professor and 3 years as a capacity of CE. He has supervised 11 PhD and MPhil scholars, deliver more than 200 invited lectures in national and international repute. He has published many books, which includes Environment and Sustainable Development through Routledge Publications and many in Springer Nature. He is a member of various national and international professional bodies like International Sociological Association, Indian Sociological Society, and Rajasthan Sociological Association. Moreover, at present, he is holding the position of Chief Coordinator, Research Committee, for International Sociological Association, Madrid, Spain, and also served as member of the Managing Committee of Indian Sociological Society, New Delhi. In addition, Professor Verma is also serving ICSSR and UGC as subject expert and assessor in UGC NAC. His main interest area concern environment and development with micro-level studies in the areas of involuntary displacement, urban ecology, social justice, and globalization. We welcome you again, sir. Apart from this, we also have privilege to have with us Professor Rajiv Gupta, who is coming with us from yesterday and sitting with us from early morning to late evening. We again thank you to you, sir. Now, without taking much time, I would like to request to Professor Tulsi Patel for chairing this session. So over to you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you for introducing. That reduces my work. Good afternoon to all my panelists, and good afternoon to Dr. Rashmi Jain and Dr. Rajiv Gupta and all the colleagues in the department. Thank you for organizing this conference and having me over. It seems, considering the number of panelists, I welcome all of them. We have 15 minutes for each speaker, and following that, I will take 15 minutes, and then we'll have a discussion. Hope all of us agree to do this. So do let me know who is the first on the panel. Who will speak first?
It's up to you, ma'am. Whomsoever you ask.
Yeah, I don't have the calendar in front of me because I'm not technically that efficient.
Professor Nagaraju.
Okay, Professor Nagaraju, you start first.
Okay, thank you.
Your time starts now.
Thank you very much, madam. It gives me immense pleasure to see Professor Tulsi Patel, madam, after a long time, at least in a virtual mode. At the outset, I'm extremely thankful to Dr. Amity and Professor Rashmi Jain and other faculty members of Department of Sociology, University of Rajasthan, for giving me this opportunity. And also, I'm happy to share the panel with my other colleagues on this important let's say, topic. So friends, we're talking about the quality of life in the context of the post-pandemic. We need to locate the very nature of development within the sociological framework. So as we have read as students of sociology, that the idea of development goes beyond the economic paradigm, right? So when you're talking about the idea of development, most of our sociologists, especially in the post-70s, they have visualized the development paradigm within the framework of the modern nation theory. So modern nation theories as a framework of rationality is known for inculcating the approach towards the life from a, let's say, from the perspective of a scientific paradigm, which also highlights the idea of modern institutions, which emphasizes on the universalization of education, universalization of healthcare, and improving the broader idea of quality life. But the point is, we are talking about the fundamental, let's say, relationship between the theoretical paradigms and the practical applications. We need to look at the very notion of quality of life, let's say, from the perspective of the clinical sociology perspective. Though as a branch of knowledge is slowly gaining importance in the Western countries, so our International Sociological Association has also had a RC, Research Committee on Clinical Sociology, which primarily deals with the policy implications of the human life. So now the point is that when talking about the idea of the quality of life, the very notion of quality of life is primarily derived in a primarily organized in a 5 important themes. One is related to the material living condition. The second one is related to the productivity, the productive activities of the people. The third indicator deals with the access to healthcare, and the fourth indicator deals with the access to education, and the fifth one talks about the leisure and social interaction, and the other points talks about the very idea of the economic and physical safety and the natural and living environment. So broadly speaking, friends, the very notion of the quality of life is primarily, let's say, though the quality of life defined by the economists, political sense and all, but all of us, we come to a conclusion that the Human Development Index developed by scholars like Amartya Sen and Mujibul Haq is generally referred as one of the important, let's say, framework in order to measure the comprehensive development of the nation and also the quality of life of the people. So we're talking about the quality of life of the people, right? I'm sure, as all of us would agree, that in the post-independent India, the modern state, both in pre-1990s as well as in the post-1990s, is working towards improving the diverse facets of the quality of life with reference to access to education, with reference to the universalization of healthcare, and so on and so forth. But the point is that whatever we have believed so far, let's say, as a part of the modern citizens, but the pandemic has primarily challenged the very notion of a life. That is, this is where I wish to invoke the concept of the C. Redmond's concept of the sociological imagination. So we as students of modern sociology, we were trained in a particular thinking of a social life. Our sociological imagination is known for guiding us with reference to the nature of education, with reference to the nature of healthcare, with reference to the nature of the consumption, as well as the nature of leisure. But the point is that, friends, when the scientific rationality, which is primarily standardized as a part of the modern nation theory, was challenged as a part of the pandemic, the entire globe, right, came to a standstill. That's where, as a students of sociology, we need to look at what are the implications, or how do you understand the sustainable development with reference to the pandemic era. I think that's where, friends, I wish to once again invoke the writings of one of the famous American sociologists by name Michael Borave, who talks about sociology in a 4 broader perspectives with reference to the academic sociology, professional sociology, policy sociology, and public sociology. As students of academic sociology and public sociology, all of us, we made an attempt to understand what are the policy implications and what are the everyday implications of the COVID life for the different sections of the society. We have seen what is the impact of COVID from the perspective of the migrant workers? What is the impact of COVID from the perspective of the school-going children? What is the impact of the COVID from the perspective of the healthcare? And what is the impact of COVID for the men and women within the same family from the perspective of gender, from the perspective of age, and so on and so forth. So my basic assumption with reference to the quality of life gains importance in the context of reimagining sociology in the context of the post-pandemic world. Because whatever the sociology we have read, which primarily got ruptured with reference to our sociological theory, with reference to our methodological protocols, in order to understand the very idea of quality of life. So when you're talking about the examples such as you're talking about the health crisis in the context of pandemic, as well as in the post-pandemic era, it primarily highlighted what is the meaning of in healthcare in the crisis for a woman. What is the meaning of a healthcare for a world woman or the marginal sections of the society? So similarly, we're talking about the very idea of education. The culture of education was primarily redefined in the context of COVID as well as in the post-COVID era. So that means we need to understand this very, as Ivan Illich rightly talks about the deschooling society. Similarly, I think we need to talk about the deschooling the pandemic social life. I think we are talking about the deschooling the pandemic social life. I think that's where, friends, where we need to look at the different parameters of the quality of life. I think that's where, friends, because what are the material factors which are primarily known for measuring the quality of life, and what are the non-material factors? Especially, we're talking about sociology. Sociology primarily deals with the human relations. But when you're talking, but the very idea of human relations were primarily challenged, or primarily, let's say, primarily rejected when we are not allowed to touch our own father and mother or relatives who are primarily died as because of the COVID. So when the human touch was not allowed towards our own kith and kin, what kind of sociology are you talking about? In what way the quality of life is primarily, let's say, what type of the meaning the quality of life assumed? So the point is that, friends, this the very notion of a sociological imagination was primarily ruptured in the context of the COVID as well as the post-COVID era. So my basic understanding is primarily comes from even the writings of another famous sociologist by name Ulrich Beck, who talks about the rise of the risk society. So I think we as a sociologist, we need to also prepare ourselves to face the risk society. So when Beck was talking about the risk society, his notion was something different some 30 years ago. But in the context of the pandemic, I think we need to evolve. We need to develop our own theoretical as well as methodological protocols in order to face the society. We need to face the let's say the pandemic society, which primarily alienates the people, which primarily known for alienating the people, not only from the larger society, but also from their own family, as well as from their own self. I think that's where this notion of Marxian notion of alienation, which deals with the industrial sector, need to be located in the context of the pandemic era. As a human beings, all of us underwent a notion of a self-suffering, notion of the suffering of the self. So when the self primarily suffers from different forms of fear, that's where, friends, we need to, let's say, recapitulate our notions from the perspective of sociology of emotion and sociology of fear, right? The sociology of fear and sociology of emotions, as two important branches of knowledge, are yet to get their importance in the mainstream Indian sociology. But I think this is the time to revisit this particular debate. So now let's say, some of the empirical points I would like to highlight and close my presentation. If madam, I think I have 3-4 minutes of my time.
Yeah, you have 4 minutes.
Right, madam. Yes, madam. So when you're talking about the empirical implications of the pandemic with reference to the quality of life, most of the school-going girls right, who are supposed to complete their 10th standard, who are supposed to complete their plus 2, but more, though, especially the girls from the villages and the girls from the poor background in the urban spaces, they were forced out of the schools. They were not in a position to, let's say, continue their study. We have seen the child marriage issue and that. This is one type. And another important point, which most of us we are not in a position to articulate, is that we are talking about the culture of education, which refers to the online learning. Most of the children, as well as the teachers, were known for witnessing a sense of alienation. As a teachers, we are only speaking to the black let's say, boards. We don't know to whom we are speaking. Similarly, the children and students, who are primarily deprived of education because of their lack of access to, let's say, the internet. That is first point. And second point, as Piri Buddha rightly mentions, the objectified state of cultural capital in the objectified state. When those who, especially those who are farmers who were capable of, let's say, buying a smartphone for the children in the context of villages, but they are not, let's say, in a position to use that smartphone in a proper manner because of lack of, let's say, computer literacy. I think that's where it's not only the ability to purchase a smartphone or a laptop, which is important, rather the ability to understand and use a particular object is also another important dimension. And another point is that, friends, as a teachers and students, most of these children and students, they were not in a position to post the online material, as well as they were unable to understand the online lectures in a proper sense. So the point I am trying to highlight here is that the culture of learning, with reference to the online education, has primarily dismantled the human relations, the emotional relationship between a teacher and student. When the emotional bonding is primarily ruptured, I think the quality of life from the perspective of a student, from the perspective of a teacher, is going to be going to take a secondary position. And the third, another important point I would like to highlight is that the quality of life with reference to the invisible workforce. The invisible workforce, friends, most of us, we were not that much aware of the invisible workforce, but we always use their services. As a faculty professors, we always travel to different cities and all. But you look at the people who are part of the informal sector, a large chunk of informal sector who primarily comes from the transport industry, where primarily comes from hospitality industry. All of them, they were the major victims of the pandemic as well as the post-pandemic life. Their entire livelihoods were shorted, and their entire notion of a, let's say, well-being, wherein their incomes were assured in a normal situation. But when their incomes were primarily, let's say, reduced to only a peanuts, I think that's where, as a students of sociology, we need to understand who are these invisible forces who are running the Indian economy, and who are these invisible forces who are primarily responsible for compression of the space and time. As Anthony Giddens uses the concept called the compression of time and space. I think that's where, friends, the millions of, let's say, self-employed people from different parts of India, from Lucknow to Hyderabad, they lost their livelihood. Because by losing their livelihood, they lost their well-being. So therefore, what is the meaning of the quality of life to the different sectors of the society? So that's why, like that, I can go on giving the number of examples, but I would like to submit only one point, and I'll submit my paper, madam. So please conclude. Yes, as a student of sociology, I think this is the high time to reimagine the sociological concept as well as the methodological protocols to develop the sociology which is going to prepare us to the future pandemics. I think that's where, as we have a respected teachers on this panel, and we are listening to our panel from different parts of the country, I would like to submit that we need to reimagine sociology to face the pandemic world. So friends, once again, I am really thankful to you, Professor Tulsi Patel, madam, and others for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Nagaraju. good that you brought in the sociology center stage. And the challenges are very many. We'll have to ask you how does sociology fulfill those. May I now request the second person on the panel. I'm not sure whether it is Vishwaraksha or Manish, but whoever is on the list, please first come. Professor
Yes,
Manish Verma or Professor Vishwaraksha?
Ma'am, Professor Vishwaraksha is on the second.
Okay, please, Professor Vishwaraksha, you.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you so much, Professor Tulsi Patel. I'm so glad and I'm actually honored that I'm sharing this dais with you. What if it is virtual?
My fortune.
And you are chairing this session. This is such a wonderful feeling. Since the day when we met physically, I think in 2017 in December, this is the day when actually I'm sitting and talking in the same plenary. First of all, let me thank Professor Rashmi Jain and her team, wonderful team of people, Dr. Monica Rao, Amiti Jasrotia. Dr. Amiti is also a product from our own department, so it also gives me a proud moment to say this, and I'm so happy to see her in the team. Thank you so much for inviting me here. Or Professor Rajiv Gupta, who's always been an inspiration and a support, who's always motivated and guiding, and he's such a great friend also. So good to see you, Professor Rajiv Gupta, sitting there. Professor Manish in person, bahut badai for being the secretary of the ISS. And now, of course, you've always been a very, very visible face. So thank you. I had, as I spoke to the organizers after the discussion, what I was planning to speak on, and is what I'm going to kind of flag some of the points here, which I'm not too sure if they'll be repetitive, because yesterday I was traveling from Kashmir, so I probably missed most of the things that were spoken. In case it sounds repetitive, I'm apologetic, because I won't be able to, make out whether it's repetitive. I am going to touch upon gender challenges in the context of COVID-19 pandemic, and thinking in terms of how during the pandemic, what all were the experiences and how they are throwing up challenges for all of us for the sustainable development and the SDG goals, especially the gender goal. And I'm glad Professor Nagaraju set the stage while talking in terms of quality of life goals, and also how sociologically, if we look at the experiences, right from the educational experiences to the personal life experiences across genders, it has been an absolute experience where not just learning, but also experimenting has been, part of dealing and challenging with this pandemic. And I'm sure this was something that none of us was prepared for, and too much of our, energy and mental peace went on in accepting the fact that this is here to stay, and we have to learn to handle extra challenges which it has thrown at us. I'm sure many of us are aware of United Nations, that Conference on Trade and Development, which is focusing now on gender and development. And they had a conference, they had a meeting in September 2021, wherein it was said that already women were facing 99 years challenge of gender inequality. I mean, in the sense, 99 more years, and then there can be a talk of equality of genders. But with this pandemic, this conference went on to say that it has taken us 4 decades back. So 40 more years added to the 99 years. And then we can talk in terms of really coming to the equal terms, the kind of inequalities that exist. So it is that magnanimity that one has to think in terms of the kind of gender challenges that this pandemic has thrown at us. Now, the point is, when we are talking in terms of gender, of course, that remains the discourse that one focuses on women and then talks in terms of vis-a-vis men and other genders. But when we are talking about women, are we talking about one particular women? Are they the urban, educated, working women? Or are we talking about across classes, across castes, and all other kinds of women? And I would kind of submit here that when we talk in terms of challenges that especially the women have faced and are going to, for some more time, coming years, they will have to face is across the classes, across different categories and different castes. And I would say the impact has been different for different categories. And in that, when we talk about genders, it's not just one or two, but all the three or beyond genders that one has to talk about. I will touch upon how it has affected the third gender, the women who were sex workers, the women who had disabilities, and there have been wonderful documentation of the research papers. I think many of us must have read the wonderful work that Economic and Political Weekly had published with Geeta Chadda's, kind of editing, and lot of inputs from various scholars talking and documenting of the varied experiences that women in this time has faced, and which has now kind of prepared us by enlisting that this is what it is going to be like. Okay, if I quickly take up one small example of one experience, and I'll of course come to detailing about the other experiences as well, is it has, it all started with distancing, and I'm so glad the social distancing now has been shifted. It has been changed to the physical distancing, which all of us for almost 2 years were asking for, were pleading for, that this is the time when we actually do not need social distancing, but we can only do with physical distancing. So that terminology has changed. But my focus here is that distancing was a burden that all of us faced across genders. And that also led to the demand of hygiene and care, sanitization. I think most of us also experienced the quarantine, the home quarantine, and how there is still a need of home quarantine in case we get a COVID positive person in our families and around. Now, who was responsible for handling all this? And I think without even discussing and giving it a second thought, we all know, and most of us sitting here would understand, and I am assuming all men and women would agree on this, that it was the women who actually contributed more to maintaining and taking up these, this challenge that was thrown by pandemic. Who was maintaining the distance? Who was giving us all the, required situation and circumstances of keeping someone quarantined, giving food, care, hygiene, and let's not forget the kind of mental trauma and stress that we all went through in the first wave, and then of course even in the second wave, which was much more worse and torturous for most of us. We lost our loved ones. There was emotional grief. There was emotional pressure. There was stress, which was not just physical, but also emotional. Who was helping to handle it? Who was giving us the care work? So it was women who were, doing all this. And we need to remember that the burden that this pandemic created, that burden was more on one particular gender. No denying the fact, and I'm going to come to that men contributed, men helped. And let me tell you what I feel at the end, and this is what futuristic, what the post-pandemic world is going to look like, is that there would be changed gender equality. Am I audible now?
Now you are.
Yeah, I think something happened to the network.
Now you're fine.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
But you have only 2 minutes.
2 more minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me just quickly say a few things that I wanted to. One is we need to remember that this work from home.
5 minutes. I'm sorry. 5 minutes.
No, I thought in any case, now it's fine. Work from home, which is such a oft-repeated discourse out of this pandemic, is something which actually not just gave the negative consequences. And of course, we all know of the blurred boundaries of work, which was the work which was done at the home, work which was done at the office. So blurred boundaries was something which was very, very negative because it led to a lot of family stress, conflict, etc. But it also has given us a very positive outcome, which I feel is of the flexi time. We now know that we can give output. We are able to work. Am I audible?
You are.
Anyways.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. So work from home, as I was saying, has also given us an alternative of flexible timing. And we have understood that despite the problems that the productivity is facing because there is a lot of work that women they have to put in. So that flexi timing is here to stay. And I think we all would also become flexible in letting the working women use this alternative which has come up. We also know the kind of work which was there in the house, and I'm just talking about these middle class and the women who are into the paid work. And I'm not talking about the unorganized sector where the salaries are less, there are no paid leaves, and their everyday wages were deducted. Domestic workers faced problems. I am talking about these women who had safe salaries and they were working from home. They also faced problems because even if a small term like child care had to be seen, child care had three kinds of categories. You had routine child care, you had child care where you had to entertain the child, keep the child occupied, and a third where you also had to kind of supervise the online schooling or homeschooling that it was called. So look at the kind of variety of the challenge that was put on a woman, even if we were just looking at the child care. So similarly, a lot of other issues came up. But yes, I must say this whole idea of life skills has come up. And I'm glad that we are now gradually moving from just these household unpaid chores, unpaid work, to be called to the life skills that everybody can inculcate, because we all know whoever had the life skills was able to kind of move out of or handle the pandemic very well. Also, another point that I want to flag here is of these, the third gender, the sex workers. These were the people who had no work during the pandemic. They were even denied, and these are the documented findings. Professor Vibhuti Patel had shared it, that how sex workers were denied the compensatory kind of food packages which were being distributed. They were said these are only for the other people and not for you. Similar was for these third gender people who had no place to beg. No, there were no celebratory functions happening where they could dance and ask for the money or whatever. So they also faced a lot of issues, which I think is also a gender challenge which emerges. And of course, the disabled women who say that already we had so many challenges. Think of a disabled woman wearing a mask who has to lip read and cannot read. Then there was this one woman who said, being on the wheelchair, dependent on others, and nobody helping. So also work from home for people, because corporate world is still working from home. We have started working offline, but there are many who are working from home. So for disabled, and also I would want to say single women, even women who are not mothers. Everybody thinks in terms of women being busy with children. What about women who were not busy with children? Women who had no partners in families, they also had their own set of challenges that we all need to think in terms of, and we cannot just neglect their problems. And the last point, ma'am, is that whole world becoming virtual. So now, for example, we are talking here. So the whole offline, the physical space issues assumed that they would not come in the virtual space is something that we need to think about. It is very much there. For example, I remember Professor Patel beginning, she said, put on your video. It's so important to have that eye contact and to look at the person while you're speaking. And all of us now speak into blank spaces where we do not have any kind of interaction. So I think that's a very important and valid point. Think of the women who otherwise in physical spaces never get space to talk, never get that encouragement and support to talk. This virtual space in some sense, again marginalizing them. Okay, you don't get space, you're not able to raise your hand, you're not able to show the facial expression that you want to say something. So that's one negative challenge, that virtual space. And of course cyber crime, etc. is there. But a very, very positive thing, and I'll end on that note, is that with virtual space, we are all in the same size screens. I think in some sense brings in gender inequality, that a woman and a man having the same space. And also we get that space to be able to speak loudly. I mean, we can even put amplifiers and make our voices heard in that sense. So virtual space in some sense would also give us some positive things. So I think there are numerous challenges. If we sit down, we will not be able to finish it. but this definitely is very, very important to go beyond just the household work and also think of the technological challenges and also think in the terms of diversity that all of us face in genders to kind of see, enlist, and then find out the solutions to the challenges which would be there in the post-COVID world vis-a-vis the sustainable development goals that we are looking at. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Just on time. May I now call upon Professor Manish Verma to give his presentation. Thank you, Professor Vishwaraksha, for this very interesting and both promising and challenging prospects on gender in the post-pandemic world.
Honorable Chair, Professor Tulsi Patel, esteemed panelists, professors sitting here on the dais. Without wasting much time, I'll come on business. I'll be addressing the discourse on sustainable development and the issues and challenges involved in it. Actually, since yesterday morning, I'm seeing the seminar and I could not find even a single paper presented which was trying to focus on the discourse on sustainable development. So to my view, an epistemological understanding of the discourse of sustainable development is quite essential. And also we need to know what kind of debates are going on across globe. While doing so, I'll also try to address the Indian scenario. That what is the situation in India and how far we are able to meet different goals which we have set forth in the sustainable development agendas. The Brundtland report of 1987, which is popularly known as Our Common Future, is considered as a milestone in the journey of the conceptual understanding of sustainable development, through which emerged the most recognized and widely accepted definition, the human ability to ensure that the current development meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. In fact, the Sustainable Development Goals set aside 3 principal goals, and these were to minimize the depletion of natural resources, to promote development without causing harm to the environment, and thirdly, to make use of environmental friendly practices. The World Commission of Environment and Development rightly acknowledges in this context that development has limitations and hence sustainable development is essentially required. The WCED stresses that the present state of technology and the social organization on environment resources, together with the limited ability of the biosphere to absorb the effects of human activities, enforce restrictions on sustainable development. However, the concept of sustainable development is not a new one, and it evolved with the rise of Industrial Revolution in the second half of the 19th century, wherein the Western societies started realizing environmental and social imbalances due to economic and industrial activities carried out by them. In 1972, Meadows and a group of other scholars ran a computer simulation commissioned by the Club of Rome with the objective to predict the consequences in a planet with finite resources. 5 major dimensions were taken up for analysis under the hypothesis that these variables grew rapidly and the ability of the technology to enhance resources was linear. The variables include population growth of the world, food production, industrialization, non-renewable energy resources, pollution generation, and the findings of the study, popularly known as the limits to growth, were first presented at international gathering in Moscow, and Rio de Janeiro stressed that if man does not impose limits to growth by the end of the 21st century, it would result in social and economic collapse. The predictions appear to be right after the elapse of 5 decades of time span, challenging sustainable development in terms of global warming, climate change, and manifold socio-economic tribulations. India, being the fastest growing economy and the largest democratic country having the second largest population in the world, also could not remain untouched with the emergent development prerequisites and have got carried away in the wave to meet growing market demand of consumer products. Ramchandra Guha points out in a retrospective overview about Indian experiences of development, and he says, and I quote him, in unanimously advocating rapid industrialization after independence, which further accelerated in the phase of globalization, Indian economists have quarreled merrily over the means to achieve the ends. Not surprisingly, the discussions have ignored the environmental consequences of economic growth as well as finite nature of many natural resources. Hence, the mad race to meet the development endeavors of a growing population not only marred the interest of the weaker section of the society in India, but also created large-scale social and economic rifts, ecological imbalances, and environmental destructions. Slowly and gradually, India has also witnessed similar backlashes which their Western counterparts were experiencing at one moment of time. Under circumstances, Peters has rightly puts in the crisis of developmentalism as a paradigm manifests itself as a crisis of modernism in the West and a crisis of development in the South. The figures of recent report released by Oxfam supports the viewpoint. In signs of, and I quote Oxfam report, in signs of rising income inequality, India's richest 1% now holds the huge 42.5% of the country's total wealth, as against 2.8% held by bottom 50%. That figure is quite alarming. Again, I can say that the Indian experiences is in confirmation with the global scenario. You see what is happening at the global level. The world richest 1% have more than twice the wealth of the humanity combined. Moreover, we have also witnessed 46% increase in wealth of the top 1% and only 3% increase in the bottom 50%. That shows the unevenness brought about in the society in the era of liberalization, globalization, and privatization. The biggest worry now is the inequalities in consumption and thus the distribution of resources. In this background of rising inequality, the problem of global warming, climate change, depletion of ozone layer, increase of forest cover, urban congestion, food scarcity, flood, tsunami, earthquake, issues of health, sanitation, drinking water, etc. are also getting far more alarming than ever before. India's speedy rise in population is impacting its environment in two major forms. The first includes consumption of resources comprising land, water, food, air, minerals, and fossil fuels. The second is waste product involving pollutants, air and water, toxic materials, and greenhouse gases. Since late 1960s, many environmentalists warn of a possible crisis due to population explosion. In 1968, Garrett Hardin wrote a paper, The Tragedy of Commons, expressing concern about possible crisis humanity would face due to exponential rise in population. Stanford professor Paul Ulrich and his wife Anne Ulrich wrote Population Bomb in 1968, which became overnight sensation. Proving the forecast accurate in India, recent predictions warned that much of Mumbai and its suburbs could be underwater due to climate change related sea level rise by the year 2050. Across India, 36 million people, equivalent to the population of the state of Telangana, currently live below the elevation of an annual average flood. And ICMOD assessment of the Hindu Kush suggests a 90% decline in glaciers through this century could place 86 million people in river basin at risk of flood and water insecurity and affect 10 times that number indirectly. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is known as IPCC, finds that warming already experienced between 1981 and 2009 has reduced wheat yields by 5%. Emergent attribution science noted that a number of extreme weather events like floods, droughts, heat waves in South Asia are partially attributable to human-induced climate change. Moreover, the state of development-induced displacement is also not satisfactory in India due to being a highly densely populated country. At present, India hosts 60% of the world population with only 2.45% of global surface area and 4% of water resources. And enumeration confirms that during last 4 decades, over 20 million people involuntarily displaced due to development projects, but as much as 75% of them have not been rehabilitated so far, and more than 40% of them are tribal, rural, and poorer section of the society. The statistics underline that development-induced displacement is affecting rural and tribal people more stringently, becomes much serious in the background that India is almost 81% short of a specialist in rural community health centers, which would have been given health support to these aggrieved, displaced, and consoled them from the wrath of displacement. Vandana Shiva, in the book Ecology and the Politics of Survival, examines how ecological movements have questioned the validity of dominant concepts of economic development in the world. The book is of invaluable help in understanding India's and the third world's environmental predicaments. In an analytical overview, she asserts, and I quote, "Due to thoughtless acts, our environment has endured harsh treatment and in many cases, irreversible damage." She holds modern economic development responsible for the conflicts and environmental degradation and proposes a new development theory which supports sustainable development and the people's rights to justice and peace. Murray Bachin has rightly mentioned in this context the assumption that what currently exists must necessarily exist is an asset that corrodes all visionary thinking. Here, the emphasis is to alarm that the planet has limited resources and if harnessed recklessly will exhaust fast, leaving us in a world of scarcity and chaos. Therefore, under these circumstances, in 1972 book, The Limits to Growth, the author argues that either civilization or growth must end. Beck, by indicating the contemporary state of Western society, has rightly called them as the risk society. The same condition, by and large, has diffused to other parts of the world in the wave of globalization, industrialization, liberalization, free trade practices, and the movements of goods, services, knowledge, and most importantly, people across national and continental boundaries. Stretching the viewpoint to another level of discourse, scholars even go to the extent of considering imbalance and inequality in societies and nations due to myopic, short-sighted, and transient development planning, which neglected not only scant availability of natural resources, but also human capital. Now the psychologists are taking note of the gloom and despair in the backlash of Earth's.
You have 2 minutes, Professor Manish.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. By confirming that it has been taken a toll on people's mental health, Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg went into deep depression over the deteriorating state of the Earth in the tender age of 11 years. The inference drawn from the present state of development and in the environmental disembark rapidly comprehend, in the words of Bell, and I quote, "Environmental problems are not only the problems of technology and industry, of ecology and biology, of pollution control and of pollution prevention. Environmental problems are also social problems. Environmental problems are problems for society, problems that threaten our existing pattern of social organization and social thought. Environmental problems are as well problems of society, problems that challenge us to change those patterns of social organization. Gradually, a clear understanding is filtering out from the discourse on environment and development that people have created environmental problems, and it is their responsibility to resolve them, and hence alternate part of development is alternatively required." Actually, the paper which I planned was, going for more than 45 minutes, and now since the time is quite limited, I will not able to complete the paper. If somebody wants, I can share my paper with the organizer, Professor Jain. So you can all have glance of that. In fact, in the coming passages, I was about to discuss the Millennium Development Goal and Sustainable Development Goal and what India is, scoring on these fronts. But since time is not permitting us to discuss all those things, so in the last, I'll conclude by saying that the perennial situation essentially advocates long-term strategies for integration of development endeavors, environmental policies, and an effective blueprint for future growth based on the principle of Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals. Academicians, policymakers, planners, development practitioners are compelled to rethink the dominant development paradigm from an environmental perspective so that environmental social ills are remedied and environmental and social justice as the goal of sustainable development is accomplished. But most ironically, despite such an agreement across globe, no one is willing to share the responsibility of environmental backlashes, and the politics of allegation and blame game is going on, wherein the developed nations are alleging developing and underdeveloped countries, and rich and dominant the poor and the frail responsible for the present state of environmental catastrophe. And similarly, vice versa is also in vogue. So at present, everybody is conversed on the issue that there's some problem with on the environmental front, but there is divergence among them on the goals, how to achieve that, and who will shoulder responsibility for that. Even the politics of blame game is also going on at the same time, and each and everybody is holding responsible to each and every person. So in this situation, we never know what would be the future and how we'll be able to attain, the sustainable development goals, which we have set for the year 2030. So with these words, I thank all of you, and especially the chair and organizers for giving me this opportunity. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Verma. I'm sorry that I had to cut you short given the time frame. But in the questions, you please address the issue of having historically built up your argument. What are the challenges for sustainable development at the moment? That will be able to cover some of the parts that you might have left out. So now, Professor Rashmi Jain, it's my time. And I take 15 minutes, and please remind me if I'm taking more. I'll stop. I'm happy that there is a context that has been built in the previous 3 presentations and also some of them yesterday. So I don't have to say much on sustainable development goals, but I'm taking only health as one of the goals, which is goal number 3 of the sustainable development goals. And given that 2030 is the time, it's really a very, very big challenge considering the time frame as well as how COVID-19 has posed even more threat in meeting the health sustainable development goal for the globe. In looking at the health theories, looking at the theories of disease and health, today we have reached a point where the theories, the existing theories, whether they are germ theory of disease or McEwan's theory of challenging that, or Omran's theory of epidemiological challenge, are all being retested or are all being put under a scrutiny, because we can neither say that we are in epidemiological transition. There is a scene where it's not showing epidemiological transition. There is a scene which shows that germ theory of disease is not a theory that can be held as valid today. So in terms of our understanding of how health works for a population, we are at a point confused about which is the theoretical orientation that takes us towards a sustainable development of health for all. So whether it is the ALMA status of universal health, or the WHO definition of health which is social well-being as well as spiritual well-being in addition to physical well-being, whatever definitions we may take, whatever tasks WHO has considered for itself on health issues, are all posing us challenges, both practical as well as theoretical. So I begin with saying that theoretically we are at a very big loss in terms of how we understand this. And with Ebola, SARS, Hini, and COVID-19 experiences, it is very, very sharply clear that neither Omran's theory nor the theory nor the germ theory enable us to understand what is happening to health. So this is a big challenge. I'm looking at the experiences of the Indian society specifically and take only two examples to build my argument. I'm trying to say that the manner in which human reproduction and services for human reproduction have been provided with Janani Suraksha Yojana, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, actions against and acts against sex-selective abortion, etc., is one side of the story. The other side of the story is how health services have been provided, particularly in the field of public health, for issues like town planning. Generally, we do not consider town planning as part of the health care program, but town planning has a great deal of impact on how eventually health is accessed by populations in a given town or in a given city. I'll start with town planning first. Historically speaking, now 1857 was the watershed. After 1857, when the British Crown occupied India, from East India Company to the British Crown, things became different. It is at this time that the British started planning for certain towns, and within the given towns, they started planning the residential area, the official area for the army and the British officers on the one hand, and left the rest of the population elsewhere. So for example, if you look at the Delhi's town planning from 1861 onwards, the area around civil lines, which is now in North Delhi, the area around civil lines was the area which even today, if you go to that area, it is all very green and broad roads, houses are dispersed, lot of ventilation, water supply, good drainage, and adjacent to it, Chandni Chowk and other parts of walled city were continuously facing problems of malaria and other communicable diseases. Now, this is one scenario in the context of Delhi. And what happened with Delhi was a specific experience of the British and the army living in parts of Delhi which were more sparsely populated. The area was much larger for that population than for the congested population in Delhi. So the pattern of health and well-being, pattern of disease, infections was very different between the two parts of Delhi. And this is true for a lot of other towns, and particularly hill towns, where the British tried to identify those hill areas or hill towns where they established cantonments for the army. And there is data that shows that there was a decline of about 80% in mortality. So the health conditions of people who were living in sparsely populated areas with broad roads and very well ventilated housing, water supply and sanitation and hygiene were the people who met with fewer diseases, who had better health, who had a better life expectancy compared to the other parts of the city which were more congested. And these parts became even more congested in the context of Delhi with migration from Pakistan, the Punjab part of Pakistan, where a lot more people from Punjab came to Delhi and a lot of other North Indian areas. So the congestion in Delhi became even more severe. So while this was the time when the Municipal Corporation of Delhi was being established, there was a task to set up more than 700,000 housing in the next 15, 20 years after partition. While all this was happening, the kind of disparity in the distribution of population, New Delhi versus Old Delhi. Similarly, if you see all the cantonment areas, you will find the geographical image and the experience of even driving on the areas which are more defense areas is very different from the areas which are not non-defense areas. In defense areas, you will really find that you can drive more easily. There is not much rush. The roads are very, very well kept. Trees are lined along the roads, etc. So there is in many ways a natural setting done consciously by the designers, by the planners of towns, where the health of those residents will be better compared to the health of other residents who are constantly facing congestion, poor water supply, poor hygiene. And this is true even after 70 years of independence. For example, when the Turkman Gate area was demolished and a lot of people were moved to resettlement colonies in Silampur, etc. It is the experience of Silampur is when you're driving in the morning to reach your job, to reach your occupational place. You can see a sea of people coming out of Silampur. So it is a very, very densely populated area, and most of the people are either walking or on rickshaws or bicycles, very few with motorized transport, against the motorized transport, which is fighting for the road space in that area. So overpopulation, density of population being very, very dense in those areas leads to a constant and repeated occurrence of gastroenteritis, malaria, dengue, chikungunya, etc. in the overpopulated areas of the towns and cities. So how town planning itself is in many ways related to health conditions and impacts the health of the people who live in those towns very unequally. This kind of inequality is also found in the areas of reproduction. I have done some research on reproduction, particularly child delivery facilities, and there are a lot of examples from Jaipur done by health experts. In Delhi, I have conducted some research, and with a lot of improvement in institutional births, particularly if you compare the National Family Health Survey 2 and 3 and 4, you will find that the percentage of births in India, institutional births in India, has increased a great deal. These institutional births are in institutions. And the interesting part is that there is very little infrastructure which has been established for the extra population that is coming for institutional deliveries. So what you find is there are sometimes people who are very poor, they reach the institutions and they are denied admissions. Women, newspapers and media report about women delivering at the gate of the hospital, sometimes at the staircase of the hospital, sometimes even in the van that is taking a pregnant woman or a laboring woman to the hospital, etc. So these are some of the examples of how efforts at institutional delivery are being overstretched because of the infrastructural weakness. So on the one hand, there is a planning for good health, for better reproductive facilities for most women, even from rural areas through referral coming to urban areas for child delivery, with ASHA workers supporting them. But the difficulty is that even in places like Delhi, there are women two to a bed. So women and their newborn babies. There is shortage of beds and two women and two babies are on the same bed who have newly delivered babies. So once when I was interviewing candidates for a research project on reproductive health in Delhi, there were a couple of doctors also on the selection committee.
Ma'am? Tulsi ma'am, are you there? Tulsi ma'am?
So is it okay? I was just to repeat some part that, is it okay now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So I was trying to say how there are a lot of experiences in child delivery, and there are reports which I have looked at from Jaipur as well as Delhi, where the pressure of number of people coming to institutional deliveries from rural and urban areas is so high that the infrastructure is not available in terms of health support staff, in terms of availability of doctors, obstetricians, medicines, equipment, as well as beds. So there are women who are two to a bed with their newborn babies. And I was giving you the example of how in an interview selection committee for a research project with some medical doctors, I mentioned that, the infrastructure is very poor and there are two women to a bed when they go for child delivery. And we say that institutional delivery is safe delivery. And this doctor told me, come to my hospital with me and I'll show you three to a bed. So imagine three women and three newborn babies on one hospital bed. These women wait for their Janni Suraksha Yojana payment to be made and then they want to leave. So the ASHA workers get their commission, women get the Janni Suraksha Yojana payment and then they go. The consequence despite all this infrastructural shortages is that maternal mortality has slightly come down in India over the past 2 decades, but neonatal mortality has not come down. So we are still facing a challenge and we are having experiences of 100 babies dying in 2 days, either in West Bengal or Gorakhpur, and of late also in Kota in Rajasthan. So the infrastructure is something which is a challenge when we talk about health as a social development goal. In terms of COVID, it is something where we can see how policy making, whether it is town planning or reproduction, institutional delivery, planning can make a very big difference. Commitment can make a very big difference. COVID-19 has brought a big lesson to us in terms of how public health intervention can be brought in. There is, for COVID-19 in the year 2019-20, the amount of money spent on COVID research and development of vaccine was 162 times that is spent on tuberculosis. Even if the number of deaths by COVID-19 and by tuberculosis is almost the same for the year 1920. But tuberculosis, because it affects the poorest people, it affects the people from slums, it affects people who are marginalized, it becomes more medicalized. But COVID-19 is one disease, one infectious virus, which has not bothered about whether a person is poor or rich, whether a person is from a developed country or a developing country. COVID-19 is a super infectious problem, which you and I have also faced. And as a consequence, the entire world has come together to conduct research into developing vaccine and spreading information. Public health education has been excellent when it comes to COVID-19. Spacing, tracking, identifying, social distancing, physical distancing, masking. So both in terms of medication as well as in terms of public education for prevention. So both prevention and cure have been attempted throughout the world. And the world has come together in terms of pouring money into research as well as development of vaccine and providing vaccinations, with some hiccups here and there, with some pressures here and there. But with 162 times the money that is being spent on COVID-19 compared to tuberculosis, only goes to show that if the public health care was taken more seriously and not just taken as a medical problem for a cure, then I'm sure we can have sustainable development goal of health being met by 2030. But do we have that kind of commitment is the question that I would like to leave you with. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
You're welcome. So shall I now take questions?
Yes, ma'am. There are a number of questions, I'm sure, from the house and online also. So,
so will somebody help me with online questions which could be raised?
Yes, ma'am. First, I'll request Professor Rajiv Gupta. He has question for all the three panelists. So may I give it to him? He is physically present in the hall.
Sure, I can see him.
Ma'am, there is one question relating to your issue.
Okay.
There are several changes which have taken place in drug trial rules now. In fact, in 2019, just before COVID and after COVID, the third stage of trial is now completely wiped out, and so many medicines have been introduced without giving attention or serious attention to the patients. And they are leading to very serious implications, not only in India, but in other parts of the world. Now, in your opinion, what are the sociological implications of these changes which are taking place, and what kind of relation will appear between medicines and society if such kind of changes undergo even without the concurrence of drug control authorities of India?
Okay, shall I attempt this? I'll take this question first, and then maybe we'll see if there are other questions that can be collated. Professor Gupta, this is a very interesting question. I have not touched on the random control trials on drugs, but random control trials have been on in poorer countries of the world all over. India is not an exception. And there are serious consequences because unless a drug is really, really tested in a proper way and approved by the drug controllers, it should not be introduced. While it is being introduced or even experimented with, the kind of people who come for as volunteers or as paid candidates for drug trials is a very serious health issue. The people who are doing the research as well as the people who are undergoing like guinea pigs are themselves not clear what will be the impact of this drug. And there the clear striking difference between people who are the haves and the people who are very poor and come for these drug trials or register themselves for drug trials are registering because of some kind of a serious poverty or indebtedness which they want to overcome in their lives. So this is clearly an issue of serious inequality, and human rights and human dignity are important to keep in mind when we look at this. So what it could be that there should be, in terms of looking at it and in terms of course, research is required. And there is a former student who is at the moment in some US university who's working on this and hope something productive will come out of her research. But I also find that practically at the practical level, we need to see that people who come for these, enroll for the random control trials of drugs should be very well informed. There should be an ethical value given to this kind of research, and a complete health insurance, health coverage should be provided to those people, because you never know what kind of influence this would have and how it will impact the future life of the person who is surrendering in many ways to these new drug trials. So rather than waiting only for the FDA to clear things and then introduce in the market for the common people, these are also common people who are helping humanity, but helping humanity at a very big cost, because it can affect their life very, very adversely. And there would be no possibilities are that there would be no drugs to treat them if things go wrong. And there are also accounts of deaths, because my work on surrogacy has shown me that a lot of women prefer surrogacy over random control trials, because the serious problem of random control trials is the uncertainty. Whereas in surrogacy, they've had their own children and they know how children are born, and reproduction is something that they are aware of. So there is a slight difference between how women come for surrogacy, even if it means a lot of medical intervention, compared to random control trials. So I take that as a very important point under the Sustainable Development Goal of health. And it's something very serious. Yes. Thank you.
Bhima Shankar, you can unmute yourself. You had raised your hand.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to raise my question. Basically, my question might be slightly different than your presentation, madam. It was a very nice and wonderful presentation. I got a new insight. My question is, India need sanitation literacy. What is your opinion about it? Actually, 2 years back, I had submitted one research project funded by my college, Gandhian Environmentalism. The title of my project was Revisiting Gandhian Ideology. Gandhian ideology and environmental history perspective. In that particular project, I mentioned Gandhi has been compartmentalized as a father of nation, but we have to think beyond it. While we think about Swachh Bharat, Swasth Bharat, these slogans are becoming popular nowadays. But what are the basic principles of sanitation? Gandhian principles. We have to follow it. This is a need of an hour. So we have to enhance the literacy rate, especially for public health, public toilets. And there is a lack of toilets and sanitations, washrooms for especially women. There is an inequality. Therefore, I can suggest you that we have to go in that way. The feminism in the perspective of public health sector. Feminism is a very emerging, ecofeminism is a very emerging sector, very emerging and dominant trend in environmental history. In my thesis also, I mentioned the number of emerging eco-feminist leaders, eco-considers. And what is your opinion about it, ma'am?
Okay, another question which is not specifically on the pandemic, but an important question which really hurts all of us.
Related
One
to
is that Gandhi is taken by different people in different pieces and bits. So people who, however it suits them, Gandhi is picked up in that context. Whereas Gandhi is a huge, huge ideology, and one needs to understand Gandhi in a proper perspective. But when it comes to Swachh Bharat, etc., we need to also focus that despite Gandhi's efforts, the brain and brawn, the Brahman and the Shudra in India still continue to be very unequal, and pure-impure divide continues to hold. One of the interesting features which I recently saw on WhatsApp was that in a meeting with the Tatas, the staff complained that compared to the toilets of the executives, our toilets are not clean. And Tata asked one of his executives to give a solution. But before the solution came, Tata asked the staff to change the plates. So the toilet for executives was mentioned as staff toilet, and the staff toilet board was taken and put on the executive board. And this continued to change every 15 days, and all toilets were clean. So this thing of economic inequality, caste inequality, brain and brawn are very, very clear. Whether we look at how things work in our own homes or in public toilets, in schools, in hospitals, one thing that I've personally observed is that if you are in a Sikh organization, which is a Sardar organization, or you are in a missionary organization, you will always find toilets clean. But if you're in a Hindu organization, toilets will never be found clean, whether it is a university or a school or a temple. So the idea of working with your hands to clean your dirt is something that we Hindus do not consider it as an honor. It is now that Swachh Bharat has become such an important and valuable institution. But even Swachh Bharat, I've observed that they take the dustbin from your house, but if there is some garbage next to the dustbin or next to a house corner, nobody picks that up. So we are not a kind of people who try to keep our houses or areas around our house clean. We all keep our own house clean, but the areas around the house we do not keep clean. We do not find it easy to clean our own bathrooms. So unless we change in many ways our own selves, or we have an educational program, it will be very difficult to think of bringing about this kind of change through remembering Gandhi, because Gandhi also had to fight a lot. He had to even come to a point where Kasturba said that if you clean the toilets of Harijans, I'm not going to live with you. And he said, okay, you can go if you want. So it's a very, very serious problem. And Gandhi needs to be understood in a proper perspective, because he really had very, very dynamic and out-of-box solutions and out-of-box ideas about how to improve life. So I think I will give more practical response to this than a sociological one. Thank you.
Ma'am, adding on to what you said about the cleanliness, etc., sanitation, one point which is very important in the context of India is that we do not have waste disposal mechanism. And this has been proved more significantly during the pandemic, when there was so much of generation of biomedical waste. And no proper policy of disposal of biomedical waste. So we need to think on those also.
Yes, well taken.
Yeah. So I think Professor Rajiv Gupta has another question for Professor Manish, I think.
Professor Manish has raised several findings based upon reports. My specific question is based upon one very important article which was written by Ivan Illich. And Ivan Illich at one stage stated that development is nothing but an effort of planned poverty. But now development which has been designed by the neoliberal forces, do you consider it is an effort for creating planned poverty all over the world? Because the kind of income inequality and wealth inequality which is coming up between 1% of the richest section of society and the 10% of the lowest section of society, is it not an effort in a very, very fast manner by which this planned poverty will become a fact of social life, and probably in future it will be used as a cheap workforce for more and more capital accumulation, which is very essential as far as the neoliberal forces is concerned?
Thank you very much, sir, for asking this beautiful question. It's quite interesting. Rather than calling it as planned poverty, I would like to call it as the question of inclusive development. And especially in the context of a country like India, which is highly populated, here the question arises of relative deprivation. And why this happened? Because see, we are in agreement with the WTO in the post-liberalization period, and we are also following the various trends of globalization also. And as a result, we have to follow the market forces. And as a result of that, we have driving our development endeavors towards the direction of the West, which they have set forth, the target which they have set forth. The problem with the densely populated country like India is that we are only trying to address the issues which are by and large in the interest of the larger bodies which are being governed by the global forces. And as a result of that, at many a times, we are not able to focus on the ground level realities that what is happening. And as I mentioned in the context of development induced development also, we are going to create, such infrastructure which are by and large fruitful for the overall development of the country. But this is also our, this would also be our endeavor to think about those who are, sacrificing their lands, their properties for the sake of the development of the country, and they are giving their land in terms of resettlement rehabilitation. So we need to think about them also, how to incorporate them into the mainstream society, how to make them part of the development endeavors. That should be our main focus. And for that, I suggest that whenever we go for any development planning, we should include them as stakeholder in that. If certain percent of that, profit goes to goes of that project in their pocket, then probably this, what you termed as planned poverty, that we will be able to eliminate in a very, planned fashion. So what I perceive is that we need to go for, reorientation of our, planning approach, so that the downtrodden people can also be included in our, development planning, which is not happening at this moment. So this is my view against this, planned poverty. So thank you very much, sir.
Sir, can I add one point? Sir Rashmi Jain ji, can I add one point?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so very good question, Professor. Just yesterday I was reading Ivan Illich's book, Deschooling Society, where he talks about modernization of poverty is the important defining feature of the capitalist society. So we're talking the whole the state policies are primarily used as a trickle-down approach. But what he argues is that there is no end to the trickle-down approach. Trickle-down approach will not reach the poorest of the poor. That is the basic argument of this Ivan Illich. But at the same time, so poverty, as our friend Professor Verma rightly mentioned, poverty is not only a third world phenomenon, it is also a first world and second world phenomenon, right? So therefore, it is the system, economic system, which is responsible for the production of poverty, right? I think that's where the political scientists or the policy makers need to take the sociological dimensions of the social inclusion and how to improve the capacity building rather than let's say, developing policies in the name of poverty, right? As the scholars like Amartya Sen, who rightly talks, who prefers to use the concept called social exclusion rather than poverty, because poverty is an idea developed by the Britishers as a part of the notion of a charity, which derives from the Christian ethics, whereas social exclusion is primarily derived from the French philosophy, which primarily highlights the multiple layers of exclusion. I think that's where the quality of life is also going to be part of this. So this is what I wish to say. Thank you for the opportunity.
Professor Nagaraju, to keep poverty intact, is it essential to have poverty of critical knowledge too?
Of course, sir. That's where that's where, sir, I differ. That's where I take a view of not. We are unfortunately thinking of poverty, philosophy of poverty. Rather, we should talk about poverty of philosophy. So the problem with the policy making is primarily comes from philosophizing the poverty as a Hegelian notion. That's where Karl Marx makes a vehement critique and comes with the idea that there is a poverty of philosophy. So I think that's where, as Oscar Lewis' notion of the culture of poverty versus poverty of culture. So my reading is to a large extent goes with, let's say, making a balanced approach towards the philosophy of poverty versus poverty of philosophy. I think this is where I think we should go with work with the Weberian model of understanding by taking the Amartya Sen notion of, let's say, capacity building approach. This is what I would say. I would like to say, sir.
Can I add only 2 minutes?
In the context of Ivan Illich book, Deschooling Society, I would like to mention that the book which he was written, actually primarily he was trying to emphasize that, you know, the stereotypical tendencies which we have adopted in our schooling system or our teaching system, wherein we compulsory send our students to the schools and we make them learn or unlearn whatever their particular skill they possess. That is the process of learning and unlearning. That was the one which he was trying to hammer upon. Actually, what I perceive is that a small guy sitting on the road who can open the scooter, all the parts of the scooter, and he can again reassemble that. He knows better. He's having better technological know-how than a person who is sitting with an engineering degree. So what he was trying to emphasize was that we need to take schools or the education out of the schools, wherein we try to make copycat of the people, and therein I'll call it, it is a culture of poverty in the sense that we have deprived the educational abilities of the skill which a person possesses, and as a result of that, you know, we are depriving them, we are making them poverty stricken from their inherent skills and from the abilities. So in that context, I can say that it is really a planned kind of, you know, poverty which you were asking from me in the initial your questions. So we need to do away with the, you know, the colonial mindset with which we are educating our students, our children, and wherein we have set targets that we have to meet that targets, and as a result of that, in the post you know, pandemic period also, we have seen that all the students, all the children, they were on the website all the time. They were in front of the computers. They were forced to read, in fact, and they were not finding those aspects quite pleasurable. They were not enjoying those, you know, learning experiences, and they were forced, because this is the market force which is driving them towards, you know, the targets which are being set forth by the global leaders. So this is what I perceive in terms of, you know, deschooling society in the present context. So thank you very much.
Sir, I agree with your statement, but it's a time to decolonize. This is a time of decolonization. That's why we can regarding the development, we can say that your growth is your responsibility. Since 70 years, we have made some such provisions, but if any communities, either it belongs to the tribal or any underprivileged or marginalized communities, they want to come into the mainstream, they have to develop themselves, their own models. Why? We are not opposing them, but we are gathered here for sustainable development. we will talk as an alternative models. Some developmental models we should develop. Nowadays, it is a time to rethink on developmental models. I think this may be a fruitful, successful, fruitful organization of such kind of national conference. Thank you very much.
I'll just make one small intervention on this point. When we say that nobody is preventing you from development, it is your responsibility to develop. In the same way, health is also considered as important. You are an individual, it is your health, and you should take care of your health. These are very tricky positions to take, because when we talk of public health, sorry, it is the responsibility of the state to make public health. And from the COVID experience, we know that if the state takes the responsibility very seriously, it does make a difference. So I think the responsibility of the individual and the responsibility of the state and planners, executives, is equally important. And we should not leave the people who are not up to the point in terms of development to say that it is your responsibility. Because if the level playing field is not there, then asking them to develop on their own is a very big challenge for them, and maybe morally not a right position to take. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, I agree with your statement. We have to follow some such family morals, values. We must respect.
Bima Shankarji, we have to conclude our session by 2. So I think we should, stop here. And yeah.
I think I
had
a question for Dr. Nagaraju, if he wants to take it, and also for Professor Manish Verma, if he wants to take it.
Thank you, Madam Tulsi Patel. Actually, we have to understand the development from different parameters, not only economic necessarily in our country. We have the social, cultural, and other parameters of development. Since a long period, we are talking about the no poverty, zero hunger, like in this SDGs. Even before we have MDGs, Million Development Goals. Even before that, after independence, we are expecting from the government that the level of the poverty will be decreased in our country. But unfortunately, 2022, the gap in between the rich and poor is not yet been decreased by any planning of the country. So can we say that when we come to by 2030, the end of poverty, no poverty after 2030? Any planners, any social workers, sociologists, or can predict that there will be no poverty, zero hunger, the quality of life, the quality of health will be achieved by 2030, or there's a need to further extend the period, like we already extended from 2015, then 15 to 2030. I think this will be again extended by 2050, and then we have to think about the end of the poverty in our country. It's my observation regarding the end of poverty in country.
I'll use Bob Dylan. To say the answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind.
The only last question, Professor Patel, to Vishwaraksha. After a long time, I am interacting with her. Vishwaraksha has given some interpretations based on work from home. A very important dimension during pandemic period. Now, my question is something different in this regard. Now, work from home means the entrance of culture of domestic sphere into non-domestic sphere, and that non-domestic sphere in the form of production industries or other entrepreneurship or several organizations. They were having a very structured kind of culture, which was related to the quality of the production and the efficacy of production. If now this domestic sphere enters into non-domestic sphere, what can be the possible implications in future?
Sir, I think it's of course very, very interesting. And as I said, I was not able to kind of elaborate, but if one looks at the things which have been documented already, I mean, Amiti has also done a wonderful research which has been published on how this domestic and non-domestic thing is coming in, and especially because I know you're talking in terms of production and how the office work and home getting together. I think it'll become very easy for corporates to allow their employees to stay at home, because that means less expense and less expenditure for them. For example, if they have to be in the office, they have to also give them space, equipment, etc. Some of the working women, the corporate working women especially, people that I've interacted with, they say now their companies have even rented out of the places also. I mean, the rent out places have been left. They say we don't require office spaces anymore, because for times to come, it will be the homes which become their office spaces. So very rightly, as you're saying, the two spheres becoming together, it is virtually, for example, if I am working for any organization, I am paying the space, the equipment, my laptop, my internet expense, whatever was borne by the corporate house or any other organization for that matter. For them, it's so much easier. And also I am stressed or I'm asked to produce my production, my output has to be of that level only, irrespective of whether my sphere or my conditions of work have changed. So I think this is, in one sense, would lead to, and if I go by Professor Rajiv's whole ideology of, Marxism, it would add to the exploitation of the employees, and whether they are female employees or the male employees. But even male employees are facing, sir, the similar kind of situation, because now offices are asking them, at least for another 3-4 months, people are at home. They have not been asked. As I said, we have been asked. We are in our office spaces, but they have been asked to stay at home, but keep giving them the output and production as they have been asked to. So I think this is going to become more stressful and more tricky to handle. So.
Thank you so much, ma'am. In the same lines, I just want to ask I just want to take 1 minute, if chair permits me. Tulsi ma'am.
Can this be the last?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I would be very crux. This is actually towards Vishwaraksha ma'am. Ma'am, you have very wonderful and very beautifully touched upon the gender challenges during COVID-19. I just want to add or observe or wanted to know about what happened during COVID-19 inside the Kinner's world, because you are working on the gender. Because this first and second lockdown was totally thrashed and devastating towards all of us under, basically who comes under the definition of normal gender. So what happened towards those gender which is not even visible to us? So if you can touch upon briefly. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Amiti. As I had just touched in what I was talking, while I said not just sex workers, but also kinnars, the so-called hijras, wherein they could not find any celebration happening, any public, it was all restricted. People's movement, mobility, traffic, gathering, everything was restricted. So for them also, it became challenged. And also with COVID, something which is seen as something that spreads with the touch, spreads with the physical closeness and proximity. For them, it's very difficult for them to survive. And third very important thing is, and it's not just for kinnars, it is for all the marginalized, be it domestic workers, be it the everyday laborer, be it the sanitation workers or nurses, who all were the frontline workers. They all faced this in COVID, that one, they were working in that kind of a situation. Two, they were facing that distance more. Everybody wanted to stay away from them. So those people who were mainstream and they were working, even from them, we were all maintaining distance. Think of people like kinnars, hijras, sex workers. From them, people are maintaining a much more, kind of a distance. And people are very, very, careful and cautious about not intermingling and intermixing with them. And that finding for them is resulting in not any kind of, livelihood input. So life is definitely becoming difficult. And for I think for kinnars, there is much more. there are policies, there are welfare measures, or there are, other things, compensatory packages, which are given to either men or women. And there are no packages for the third gender. They are not counted in. So wherever somebody has to put in a tick and say so many things distributed, so much done for men and women, they never come in any of these categories. So one has to actually, speak for them. Somebody has to, and that's what activists and activism was doing. Let's speak for them, do something extra for them, which otherwise is assumed that it is just the men, women, children, old people, unwell people, sick people, but nowhere they were counted. So I think that just makes it much more, trickier and much more a greater challenge.
Thank you so much,
Yes.
ma'am.
So I think this is time to wind up.
Yes.
Thank you very much for all the speakers on the panel and the questions and people who raised questions. Thank you very much, organizers. And it was really a very well organized session and good discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It is indeed a great pleasure for all of us to have all the erudite scholar at one place. Who would be more richer than us? You can count that. I would like to extend my warm thanks to Professor Tulsi Patel for chairing the session wonderfully. Ma'am has very aptly and properly pointing keen insights on pertinent issues. Thanks is also due to all the panelists for joining us in all online and offline mode. We are very fortunate to have you with us. Professor Nagaraju very gracefully and scholarly raised the questions of the impact of development on marginal population. Professor Vishwaraksha has touched upon the kind of challenges that has been central towards gender. Very appropriately, ma'am has focused not only on one or second gender, but also third gender. Professor Manish Verma has touched upon the situation that prevailing in India in context to sustainable development, how the global warming and extreme weather events are adding more severity to the existing situation. Thanks to Professor Rashmi Jain and Professor S.L. Sharma and our loving seniors for the constant support and encouragement. Thanks to Professor Rajiv Gupta, and it is a special thanks to you, sir, to sitting with us for these 2 entire days and giving your valuable insights very appropriately. With these concluding remarks, I invite you all for the lunch outside, but with little announcement that we are shortly going to have valedictory session sharp at 2:30 p.m. So please respect the time and be on time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you.
Thank you, Tulsi ma'am. And thank you, Professor Vishwaraksha, Professor Nagaraju, for accepting our invitation.
Good to see you all. Dr. Rashmi, good to see you all. And how I wish I was there at Jaipur.
I know, I wish we could have you all here. But
Maybe next time I will.
Online. Yeah, next time, definitely.
You have a wonderful team. Hi, Amiti.
Yes.
And I have to meet Rajiv sir. It's been so long. Rajiv sir सुन ही नहीं रहे. Sir, आपने जम्मू आना है.
I'm fine. I'm coming to Jammu very soon.
Sir, आओ ना, जल्दी आओ.
आ रहा हूँ, बिल्कुल आ रहा हूँ.
ठीक है sir, आइए. Okay. Okay, thank you sir. Okay, Rashmi ji, bye. I will log out now.
We can't offer you lunch, I'm sorry, but then I think have a happy lunching at your own place and then we shall meet again. Thank you so much for everybody for joining online, and we'll take a break, and 2:30 again we reassemble. Those who are online, they can join us online, and others will be off. The valedictory address will be delivered by Professor S.L. Sharma from Chandigarh. So kindly be on time.